because you can't measure it, right? It's so subjective, and everyone goes through different types of emotions. So to me, emotions would be sort of like a coping mechanism that is built up over time, dependent upon what kind of experiences that you've had yourself. So
Yeah, like
it would
people
just
can
be so
control their.
subjective that, like, something that would make you happy might make me sad, or vice versa. So
Yeah, if you understand how incentives work and all that, and you understand people get angry when something bad happens to them, people are happy when something good happens to them, and all that.
And part of
This
that
idea of
idea,
emotional intelligence is completely useless in that kind of calculation.
and part of these
Read the
incentives
book
tie
Frames
the
of
whole.
Mind. I don't know. It sounds kind of hippie. Why should I read it?
I mean, when you mentioned incentives, right, and we mentioned the effects that certain decisions may have on your emotions, this actually ties a lot into cultural materialism that I was talking about earlier. And our behaviors are essentially decisions, our decisions to treat other people a certain way, right? So when we seek to behave a certain way, it's usually for material gain, or rather, if not for material gain, it's neutral to our current economic standpoint, right? Because any behavior that comes at a detriment to our material gain are ones that we're more adverse to exhibiting.
Oh, I saw that book in college classes of communication and stuff like that. I don't know. I haven't read through and read the book necessarily, but I had lessons on that kind of topic. I don't like the idea that there are multiple intelligence in the field of sociology is kind of sound and all that, but I think it's kind of I think it's kind of useless because people ultimately respond to incentives, and you can change your emotions, or people's emotions will change according to their situation. Not people decide their emotions, or they have a emotional intelligence and stuff like that. I think it's
Yeah, that's
automatic
too.
and very, very predictable.
Yeah, that's too introspective, right? I agree with what they're doing right now, and I keep saying like we can't let them like just take stuff like this because they ruin it. But I think there is something that can be measured and quantified there, and I think it is. But the way the direction they're going in is something that's complete bullshit. Like they're taking something that exists possibly, but they're applying all this bullshit, and they're not even talking about what could exist, what probably does exist. They're talking about this made up belief of emotional intelligence, like you said, and it's bad.
Yeah, like some political parties will use emotional intelligence for how long you get along with someone. If someone hits you, it would be emotionally intelligent to not hit them back or something like that. And that's not necessarily true. Incentives is a better way of looking at it because emotional intelligence can offer a value judgment on something, and that value judgment could be completely wrong. Oh, let's see.
And to me, that's like what I'm saying. Like, to me, to be emotionally mature is knowing when to act and when not to act, and when to fight and when not to fight. And they're trying to make it where like not fighting is emotionally mature.
I don't think emotional intelligence exists, though. If someone would choose $10 billion of their own kid, that would go to their values, that would go to their axioms, maybe the way they think and stuff like that. It wouldn't apply to it wouldn't apply to their emotional intelligence. That'd be like labeling each different way of thinking as an emotional intelligence. Like you have an emotional intelligence of 66. Well, someone has an emotional intelligence of 120, and maybe one would choose the $10 billion, or one would choose their own kid. Someone could rationalize, oh, I could just have another kid with the $10 billion. That'd be all. That's the objective value and benefit. They're looking at it that way. Or some people would think, oh, human's life is invaluable, never going to get the kid again. His life is worth more than $10 billion ever will be. So I'll reject the $10 billion.
So
how a person values something is an incentive. Yeah.
So I'm taking yeah, I agree with that. But I'm taking a lot of people here. They believe in the whole libertarian Marxist view of things. Like if you don't get something out of it, then you're probably not going to do it, and that's why we evolved. It had to be like something gained 100% of the time for evolution to happen. I don't think it really worked that way.
You do earn something from a value. You earn a dopamine rush in your brain when you when you pick something according to your mental values.
But are you really gaining something when you get an dopamine rush? Because from my understanding, that chemical is already there.
Well, absolutely.
You don't gain anything in terms of economics, but you gain something in terms of cost benefit.
Yeah, and so those types of
people will do
pressures, like
things
he's
detrimental
explaining,
to feel
that's
good.
what would lead to your emotions. Those things would build different types of emotions in you. Just be like a coping mechanism.
See, I think it's
coping mechanisms.
I think
like
it's
when you're a
more
kid, you have to understand the concept of anger. I don't think you have an emotional intelligence, and your emotional intelligence changes over time, and you gain emotional intelligence IQ points or whatever. You just learn how to cope with the incentives.
Yeah, exactly. So like if you get angry and say you get punished, then you learn that getting angry gets you punished.
Well, I mean, that's like to me,
if you get angry and you get rewarded, and your brain makes a little check mark in the rewarded box, and you learn that getting angry gets you rewarded.
So I don't think it's 100% classical conditioning like a dog, but there is something to that because of how we cognitively associate things. But I think humans don't necessarily cognitively associate
TOS,
things.
I disagree. People make decisions based on the theory of incentives, and because emotions are fundamentally something that fits into the category of incentives, values and morals also fit into the category of incentives. People are all fundamentally hedonistic.
Yeah, like so me, like
if you weren't hedonistic, you wouldn't have evolved and you wouldn't have lived.
Is trying to say there.
I don't think we're hedonistic.
But I would think that would be like what kids would do, right? And so then when you become an adult, you learn to make more rational decisions as opposed to emotional decisions.
Well, that's part. That's what's called maturity, right? We're saying we're saying emotional intelligence, but that's literally, are you mature enough to act like a fucking adult and put up with shit?
So that's why emotional intelligence. That's why I say it's bullshit, because if like you're over empathetic, right, that's detrimental to your decision making capability, because then you would make more emotionally based decisions rather than rationally based decisions, which is much more superior.
Yeah, that's
TOS. I would disagree. You're missing a step. You didn't make a decision based on emotions. You made a decision based on a trade-off. You could have chose to went or not, and you have to make a value-based decision. And dopamine and chemical firing going off in your brain can explain that logically, not your emotions and emotional intelligence and things like that. That's just absurd to me. There's no way to measure that.
I disagree. I disagree that it's pleasure trade-off, right? Because people can do things and choose the negative path. No one's the negative, and no one's going to hurt them. No one's going to be horrible. Yeah. They're not really getting anything out of it in the ways of chemical rush or anything like that. And they do that a lot. It's not as clean cut as what chemicals are blowing through your brain.
Yeah, I agree with that, because see, you can make a logical decision.
It completely is, though. That's how people think. You
can make a logical decision based in the moment, right? And that may hurt you in the moment, but later on down the road, it's beneficial to you. Say, like working out may be painful in the moment, may not give you, some feel good, but, in the future, that you're going to be better off for it. That's just
so. Do you people think and learn fundamentally through trial and error, through chemicals in your brain, and through stuff like that.
There's other ways to learn, right? But do you believe in free will? I mean,
oh gosh.
Do I believe in free will? Very, very lovely thing to say, and I do believe in free will. I'm not going to try to say that people's chemical reactions in their brain is going to make a systemic system, and I don't know, therefore we need communism or something gay like that. No. I do think that is fundamentally how people work, but people do have free will and are able to make decisions and can come about and justify and create their own methods and control how their brains work and all that, and
I agree.
Things like that.
And I agree, and that's why people are able to go against what is incentively good for them.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And so therefore, we're not all driven. We're not all
even though
driven
that's
by
a net loss to me. But there's a reason I won't cut myself though, and that is, because it is a net loss to me, and there's nothing I gain from it. But someone living their life could make that decision, hoping or expecting some kind of gain from it, and they don't get such a gain.
Yeah.
But you still have a choice to make, even if you're not dictated by your emotions. I believe you have free will, and despite all these dopamines, chemicals, and situations people were put into.
How do you think free will came about?
I believe it's something we've evolved.
I agree too. I personally break it down to, like, have you ever looked at like very early evolved creatures, like have you seen that article where the flower actually knows it's being eaten and would try to defend itself by putting out like something to make the bug not eat it?
Well, terms of service, someone could still drive perfectly well when they're upset, the same way someone could still drive when they're intoxicated. It's illegal to drive when you're drunk, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every time you drive when you're drunk, so that you're capable of driving, that you couldn't be able to drive properly home if it was a short distance and all that. Well, I disagree with one, and I gave an analogy.
So, term of service, like, your argument that you're making is not a proper way to define emotional IQ. If you want to define emotional intelligence, right? You're literally saying us not properly reacting to protecting ourselves or to this and that proves that you have a high emotional IQ. It sounds like you've just been indoctrinated by a false ideology. You should check your emotional IQ, bro.
All right, so beyond emotional
I
IQ,
took my emotional IQ test. It said I scored highly. I totally know what that means, and I totally know how to improve my emotional IQ. And I'm going to, study at the school of anger, and I'm going to overcome that and get another highly next time I take the test. I'm gonna totally ace that, next time. I totally went to the anger university, and I'm gonna
become a clown, bro. That's the best way to.
I'm gonna meditate with the Buddhist monks all day and go to Scientology, where I could just control my emotions to the T, where I'm dead inside.
That's gonna work. Make sure you drink green tea, though.
Yeah, I'm gonna flush my system of toxins. Masturbate fiercely and stuff like that. Get it out every piece of aggression I can ever think of.
So, Nugget, do you talk on the mic, or you'll have to explain why you think that free will does not exist, and where you come from, this illusion, as if we live in a matrix or something?
So, can I hear me?
You're breaking up a bit.
How is free will an illusion?
The order of process, right? You got to think about how free will came about. If you look at the earlier plants of evolution, right, it started with one sensor being fed and the contemplation of that sensor. Whereas we evolved, we've gained more sensors. Like, the human body has so many senses to detect for danger, this and that and the other. Our way to contemplate on which one is more dangerous and which one we should react to if we got multiple dangers coming in, it created the ability for us to contemplate, and therefore we can actually choose things. And that's exactly how it happened. To me, anyways, evolutionary-wise.
So yeah, like, human decisions are definitely not just what's innate, right? That's ridiculous.
All right,
it's something that's built up in you, right? You learn how to logic correctly, you learn how to emotion correctly, and all these other things. It's like it's a built up of experiences. It's not just something that's just innate. It's like, the decisions you're going to make tomorrow weren't like conceived before you were born, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and like,
All right,
and that's
so I got a few
that's one thing you
questions
gotta think
before we
about
move to
evolution.
You know, and to adapt in the environment that you're in, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and that's like the cognitive association. That's the learning part that we go through, right?
Yeah.
We have a creativity part, which is our what builds culture, and then we also have the learning part, right? Like language is part of culture because it's created, but once it's created, it's established. You learn it. It's cognitive.
Okay, so I want to answer these two questions. Is who you are a result of free will, and what motivated them to swerve into a car? How is past experience an incentive? I hope I answered that question. And what motivated them to swerve into a car if they were angry? Well, if you're saying it's one thing, if you're saying it was because they were angry, that's a very irrational take on it. There are multiple incentives making people do things or making them not do things. If they're incapable of smashing into a car, without a doubt, they haven't decided to do such a thing. But there could have been various things, various chemicals going off in your head making you do it. I don't think emotions or whatever, emotional intelligence or whatever you want to call it, is a very good definition unless you a very good explanation unless you apply how people respond to positives and negatives. That's just a much more rational way to look at it than emotions, because emotions do have their positive and negatives apply to it. When you're angry, you tend to be more like this, and there's reasons for it and all that. But that's just fundamentally an incentive itself. Saying emotional IQ and all this is just absurd. And who you are a result of your free will. I am able to make choices. I could wear a black t-shirt, a red t-shirt, a blue t-shirt, and I will make that decision. It could be pre-recorded, maybe there's some supercomputer that could make every possible decision I could make, the same way a computer can make every possible chess move on a chessboard and all that. But I still have free will to decide what I do or don't do.
Just because you swerve, just because you do something that's violent, doesn't mean you have a low emotional IQ. There is a time and place for violence in a term of service. Do you not agree that when you're met with violence, you have to have violence to stop that violence?
Sometimes it's the only way. Sometimes gentle persuasion, intimidation, sometimes Machiavellian, sometimes backstabbing, betrayal. You have a lot of options ahead of you if you're in a very bad situation like that. And sometimes self-defense or murder or shooting them is the best option. Unfortunately, the police don't carry around a dictionary. They carry around a gun.
They don't hand you a lollipop to stop you.
Wait. You're telling me all police use violence to stop violence, so all police have low emotional IQ?
Violence can be stopped can be ended by the person being violent stopping. You act as if everyone who ever gets violent is permanently violent and can't calm themselves. No, people absolutely can.
Dude, here's the thing. If you lay over and die for someone, if you let something horrible happen because you didn't want to have a low emotional IQ thing or whatever it's called, is that in accordance with the natural law, right? And if it's not, to me, if it's not in accordance with the natural law, then it actually shows a lack of emotional IQ because your emotions is out of whack. That was for you in terms of service, by the way.
Yeah, it seems to me that a lot of these sort of theories are predicated on this utopian idea, right? Like things that just not going to happen. It's not reality. It's sort of like trying to create some sort of utopia or whatever in your mind, or how other people should behave.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything about how other people should behave or whatever. I'm just saying this is how people think. People are hedonistic, and the theory of incentives is the best way to look at that. This emotional IQ or whatever thing is just absurd. It's not going to give you any answers.
I actually think
he does have a point.
Dumbed down, but yeah.
He does have a point.
I think the emotional IQ thing, though, if you look at it, is like we've been talking about somewhat Pavlov's dog and classical conditioning or parent conditioning, right? A little bit here. And if you think about what that is, it's telling people to stifle their need to react accordingly to violence, right? And they're saying that's a good thing. When you stop yourself and protect yourself, that's a bad thing. And when you protect yourself from that violence, that's a bad thing. And to me, it seems like these people are being conditioned to just accept violence in their life and not do anything about it.
He has a point.
Wait,
He has a very good point.
Who are you talking about?
Me or who?
Well, the gentleman that just spoke. He has a very good point about how violence is becoming less and less of a shock value. And everybody's just supposed to be conditioned to just carry on.
Some people can be desensitized to violence or whatever, or
yes.
Some people
it can be desensitization. It can be traumatic. It can be traumatic events also, not necessarily something that you see in the television, but something of a personal traumatic experience. And the whole thing about measuring your emotional levels, I do think it's a system created to somehow put everybody in a certain box of how to react to things and how to reciprocate the correct emotion that is deemed justified in society. Do I think we have free will? Yes, but it's not what we think it's supposed to be anymore because we're being controlled in some way to follow, again, how society wants people to behave, act, appear, think, respond. So maybe a long time ago we had free will, but I think in this modern time that we are all existing, it doesn't exist as we believe in ourselves to have free will.
Hirith,
so
what the fuck is this autism over free will?
Yeah, I think that was a bit of a stretch there with the whole free will thing, but I think that we still have free will. But
No. I do not say we don't have free will. We absolutely have free will, but it is not necessarily ours. It is something that has grown into our bodies. Like, let me give you an example. We all grew up eating McDonald's as kids, but why were we subjected to that, right? Because of someone before us, our parents, right? You go to McDonald's, you have your first experience. That experience will justify for the rest of your life, unless you choose to think about going somewhere else to eat for a cheeseburger.
All right, so let's define free will, because free will is an illusion.
I do not. No. It's not an illusion.
I don't agree with that.
Free will is not an illusion. It is something that is born and instilled in us, but is slowly altered through the process of growing up. Whatever you're subjected to will alter your choice, right? For example, we all went to high school. Maybe some of us didn't, right? If your high school is a really good high school, good students, good academics. No. Let me finish. I let you talk. Okay? Try to eliminate the fact that I'm a woman, because right now you're probably judging my answer based on my IQ and being a woman. Try to, for a second, not to think about that. Okay? Now, as to my example about free will and thinking, let's say you go to a high school. Your high school is good, prestige, great students. The ideal school that you probably see in every teen drama. Okay? You are going to always think your high school is better than others, no matter if that school is better stat-wise. Because your emotions also control your free will.
Community. If you live in a really shitty community, you'll recognize that your high school is awful.
Well, if you're in denial, you will probably deny the fact that your school is shitty.
That's not
A lot of
something that
people are in denial. A lot of people want to hold on to something that they feel like I have to have something good.
Well, in most countries, there's a huge inequality of different education. Like, if you live in a really heavily urban area, or you live in like Detroit or something, right? Your education is going to be worse than someone's education, say, in like New England. And you're going to recognize that, and you're going to face the economic detriments that come with that, or the materialistic detriments that come with that.
What if you are your brain? It is your brain doing it, and there are chemicals, and there are limited.
Hold on. That first sentence that you just said. What if you? That is some stoner bullshit that you started out your speech.
Are you trying to say like the?
I'm responding to someone. I'm not. I read the chat if you. So you're less confused. I'm responding to terms of service as a little paragraph there.
Okay.
All right, so I'll read terms of services comment and I'll respond to it. Free will is a projection made up by our mind to make us feel in control. Without this feeling of control, we can't make decisions. All decisions are based on information entering the brain, interacting with information already available in the brain. The brain makes a decision that you cognitively feel you yourself have made a decision, when in reality it is your brain. I say that's incorrect. There may be all these other incentives.
No, he is absolutely correct. He is absolutely correct right now. He is absolutely correct. And I'm not sucking your dick. I'm telling you, you are. Okay? Again, when we are born, we don't have anything in our heads. We only have the survival sounds and movements. Our brain is like a computer, and whatever you put into it, maybe it will be, ingested. Maybe it will be digested out back into the world. Okay? But whatever you put in your mind, that over time builds and creates its own shape of thought, kind of like a motherboard. Okay? Whatever you put it in, it's going to affect the way your computer, works and functions. I'm not saying thinking.
I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that, unless I'm mistaken.
Well,
I mean, it's a big thing in computer programming talk. Garbage in, garbage out. It's the same thing with people, I'd assume, and exactly like you're saying. If you give people a bunch of shitty experiences and don't teach them how to deal with things properly, chances are that they're not going to deal with things properly.
All right, so I'll say something. Everyone here should absolutely agree. We all have the ability to make choices. However, some people don't think we have free will, and if you think free will is beyond making all the choices limiting to you as a mortal being with a body, and you're only able to make so many choices based on information available to you in your brain, based on what your body and stuff like that's capable of, and all that. If you don't think making choices like that is free will, very well, maybe we don't have free will in that sense. But I do think
I don't think that's the argument for free will. I mean, the argument against free will kind of comes from an understand it assumes that we're entirely reactive to our environment when there's much more aspects of our psychology, such as construction and creativity, that would imply free will.
Sure. Well, I don't see why we have consciousness if we don't have free will or free choice.
Where did Frying Republic go? Wasn't the stream centered to him?
Yeah, he's still recording.
Oh, okay.
Oh, people recording. I didn't know that.
Well, we did announce it, but I guess you weren't there.
Yeah, no.
Ability to choose isn't free will. So what is what are we going to use for the term of free will?
I don't think you understand what free will is, Jagar.
All right, what is it then?
I just got back.
I'm waiting for terms of service to finish typing.
Terms of service says ability to choose isn't free will, and I believe the ability to choose is pretty much what people mean when they say free will, but I believe we're using other definitions.
Pretty much the same thing as free choice. I would say.
Because if you're given a limited, if you're given a limited array of choices, then the argument is that that's not free will.
Oh, okay. So, well, I mean, if you define it that way, then no, we don't have free will because we're absolutely limited based on the choices we can make. But just because we're limited on the choices we can make doesn't mean we don't have free will. So the way I read it before was, if you look at a chess game, a chessboard, or a game of chess, you have to follow confine yourself to that closed world. What you actually do is you open up an almost infinite number of possibilities of what you can do within that framework, right? So you have the free choice of, where to move your knight as long as it is fitting within the rules of the game. So yes, you are limited by the rules of the game. However, you have tremendous free choice of what to do as long as you're acting within those rules.
Okay, people have freedom of choice. I guess that should have been what the term I'm saying.
By the way, can we move the topic back to Frying Republic? Do you have anything you want to discuss? Or what?
Free and Republic, are you there? Hello? Hello? Alright, so I guess we'll move on to another topic since he seems to be AFK. So it's... But yeah, alright, so... We're talking about emotional intelligence, talked about free will, freedom of choice, and all that. Yeah, the topic was a bit of a useless circle joke. I was thinking I had my terms mixed up, I suppose. Oh well. All right. So, terms of service. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? I got you, fam. You got a topic we can go on about?
Seems like everything is dead.
Race and IQ. Well, kind of touched on that before, but all right. What do you want to say about race and IQ? Is race and IQ real? I think race and IQ are both real. Just memeing? Oh, yeah, we did a lot of that. So, Mug, do you think, what do you think about the IQ disparity between genders is? Hello? Mug, hello?
That's
We should talk about nationalism.
All right. Is anyone against nationalism?
I am.
Why are you against nationalism?
It boils. I mean, I feel like it boils down to my disregard for the legitimacy of borders. I mean, if we like go down to the crux of all my anti-nationalist beliefs, but it's mostly because it creates social and material divisions among people that are unjustified.
Okay, but how do you actually enforce?
What if there was a
state
society?
contract?
All right, what if there was a society that was nationalist, in of the sense that it treated its citizens better than people who were not its citizens, and those citizens lived in a min-cap, stateless society, or a very low state of the society, and it ensured everyone would be treated equally and give all these rights to people, and there'd be very little government interference, and
well, it's not necessarily
any enforced differences between people.
Well, you can't just jump straight. Like, you can't just eliminate borders overnight. It's not that simple. You have to have the material conditions necessary to transition into this stage.
I'm not saying there wouldn't be borders. I'm saying there'd be borders between citizens and non-citizens. What's the issue with that?
But what do you? Well, of course, we have to have borders between citizens and non-citizens due to the material conditions that exist in today's society. But that doesn't mean, like, hello? Did I cut out?
Your mic cut out a bit, but I can hear you now.
No, that doesn't. Yeah, we have to have borders in today's world because of the material conditions that exist in society right now. But that doesn't mean that nationalist values are legitimate.
What's wrong with self-preservation and the right to own property and things like that?
I never said anything about the right to own property, but when it comes to self-determination, or sorry, I meant self-preservation, right? Or the preservation of your own people, that's fine as well. But nationalist sentiments, typically, and sentiments that come from self-preservation of one's own culture, race, ethnicity, whatever, right, lead to social divisions and material divisions among different people on an axis of essentially unjustified fear. Because
what do you mean unjustified fear? Like, how do you actually implement a type of social contract and enforce it within a region, if not by means of a nation state or a city state? You're kind of talking about this globalist effect.
Well, you can't enforce it praxeologically right now because of the material conditions.
Are you talking about like contracts instead of nationalism and people living together in a state of nationalism? You're thinking everyone's gonna have like contracts to private property?
We have to have borders in today's society because of material conditions. I'm not advocating for contracts. I think that eventually the need for borders and states will be dissipated. But right now, we have to have objects like the states and borders.
No, I think that if the nation state does get abolished, they'll simply be replaced by the city state.
I don't see how nationalism will get replaced unless we have like an ANCAP society or a very, very free market and government control really gets cut down.
I don't mean nationalism will be replaced. I believe that it's a fundamental biological imperative that humanity has to actually form these identities based off of their regional group. Ultimately, I think that if the nation state ever does get abolished, it's going to simply be replaced by the city state, or at least it should be replaced by the city state. Any sort of globalist centralized power to actually enforce some type of social contract is just going to become incredibly corrupt, in my opinion, or be susceptible to corruption at a scale never seen before within human society. Not only that, but if we instead take a different approach, such as one that's completely deregulated and no sense of centralized power, then that will simply develop into what we now know as the nation state anyways. So it's kind of absolutely no point in going in that direction.
There's a problem with that answer, because it necessitates that you have to rule over a piece of land. So what defines the city-states by today's standards is that they still claim a piece of land. So yes. If you don't claim a piece of land, you can become practically invisible when it comes to the nation's borders. So you don't need nationalism. You don't need to claim a piece of land as long as you are the provider for the people of that area. You don't need to say, this is my country, and then the state these are my borders, depending on how you view it. But I believe it's possible, at least, to abolish nationalism and leave that to rot in a hole, and then rather focus on maintaining the land that you'll
So you're
live on.
saying nationalism will abolish itself eventually when people give up the once trading, buying, selling land isn't available in the free market and everyone just lives and
There's a difference
people
between
owning
a
land is
person-
absurd, or what?
There's a
No.
difference between a person owning land and a state claiming it's its own land. Like, I won't infringe on you claiming that your farm is yours, but when it comes to this country is the USA, even though there are US citizens and Irish citizens and Spanish citizens in the US, for instance, it still claims to be the US. It claims that these lands are US lands. Why would the US claim ownership over these lands instead of ownership over its people? To me, it seems absurd that you would say, no, this piece of land is mine, instead of actually utilizing the land in the most effective way. It shouldn't
Because
matter.
you actually need borders to actually create a regional populace.
Yeah,
That's
but
basically
you
how
can
regional
rather
population-
identify that through the people, right? So
You can
instead
have
of
a
saying
federalized
everyone
That's
knows
the
well,
entire
you don't
pay
have to-
taxes.
Wait,
You can
hold
have
up.
a unitary
Hold up.
state that's federalized. You don't have to have it separated into different states.
We have to understand that at the end of the day,
So,
borders.
so you guys are talking about
Yeah.
the government owning land?
in rhythm bot.
Server muted.
So basically,
I tried
we
to
have to
server mute it too.
understand. Yeah, we have to understand that borders are nothing more than a agreement between the nations that are within the surrounding region, right? Borders are simply there as a mechanism to avoid conflict and wars between inherently different people.
But they're
That's
not
basically-
necessarily inherently different. Have you been on the border of many places? Like, there's
Yes.
not much difference between the border between Norway and Sweden, or Norway or Finland. Like, mostly the same people live there. If you've been in the northern regions of Scandinavia, you have Sápmi living on both sides of the border, and they just wish the border wasn't there, because ultimately they don't adhere to these nations. They have their own Sápmi court, they have their own Sápmi lawgivers, and they have their own system on cross of all these borders, and it functions. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Clint, compare that to like South American borders or like.
I don't understand what point you're trying to make against nationalism.
It's
point
You
I'm
don't want the
trying to make-
government owning it,
Wait, hold on.
but you don't want like an ANCAP or anarchist society or a MinCap one, like with less
I'm
government
saying
involvement.
borders
I don't see what point you're making.
necessitate nationalism. I'm saying nationalism has to be defined without the borders, because the borders don't matter.
They kind of do.
Not in the sense of ownership, because there's a difference
Yes, they
between
do.
what you can like utilize.
Like
and what
you
own.
understand that human history is full of conquerors conquering land and stuff like that, and
And how
getting,
many conquerors are there out in the world right now? I believe most of the land is conquered.
Clint, you have to understand that at the end of the day, borders are a necessity for this idea of a nation, simply because it's a contract between multiple nations, multiple peoples.
But again, you don't have to have
Wait, hold on.
have a federalized
Hold on.
system. You don't have to have separated.
Wait,
nations.
let me finish the point. So you're kind of talking about this perspective of similar to what ANCOPs usually advocate for, which is the perspective of individualistic ownership of property rather than collective ownership of property. You have to individual property and the ownership of property is not something that's an inherent right of a human, but simply a spook that's enforced by a regional state. And you need borders to actually, and you need borders to actually understand how one regional state enforces this social contract versus how another regional state enforces the social contract. And those social contracts are inherently manifested by the people within the region. The state is nothing more than an institution to implement and enforce the social contract to begin with.
Sure, but that can be done without claiming that a piece of land is yours. That could simply be done by saying, you subscribe to this state, okay, then you have to adhere by this contract.
No, that's not.
All right, so let me ask you a question. Can I plant crops anywhere I want in the world? Could I plant a whole bunch of weed wherever I want?
No, hold on. Having ownership over the resource that you use by the production of land doesn't mean that you have ownership of that land. So that while that crop may be yours, that doesn't give you a claim over that land.
So why should a group of people who were hunter-gatherers or whatever, who cultivated the land together and had a community of the land, allow someone, a sole person or an individual, to own a piece of that land?
The fundamental unit of property is labor. The creation of one's or the product rather of one's own labor is where we should derive all property rights. That land did not come from the product of any individual's labor.
Yeah, that land existed without the labor, right?
Sorry?
I mean, the land existed without the labor. The crops itself doesn't need necessary labor to grow because you have plants and trees that yield fruit.
Believe me, in the quantity that agriculture demands, it needs labor to be that way. That doesn't happen naturally.
I understand. I understand. For us to feed the food, right? For us to feed everyone, the quantity, the amount is going to be more labor intensive, right? But labor in itself shouldn't dictate who owns the land because of that. Because if that food is being
how would
used
you then define ownership?
Well, no,
Wait,
ownership is.
Wait, hold up, guys. Labor. Come on, let him finish. Let Brian finish. Brian, you were saying something?
What I'm saying is, when you look at the fact that land ownership by individuals, and you're making the argument that, well, you need to cultivate the land to produce more food, and so therefore that individual has to have labor-intensive work, so he owns the land. But here's the thing: that amount of food that's being produced is not for that individual; it's for the community. So why would the community give up pieces of land to an individual to rule over them?
That's not the argument that we're making, right? Property rights
derive
from one's own labor. You can own what's produced from that land and your own labor, right? But
what argument are you guys making against nationalism? I'm not really understanding what your point is.
Like that's ultimately the point, right? Ultimately, if you generalize it, if a group of people, a community have lived in this land, like say Europe, for the longest time, right? And they had a communal thing. What gave the right for an individual to come and say, this land is mine?
Nationalism is defined like this. Nationalism is a political, social, and economic system characterized by promoting the interests of a particular nation, particularly with the aim of gaining and maintaining self-governance or full sovereignty over the group's homeland. So, basically, they want to adhere the claim that they have constructed over the land that they claim to be theirs. So yes, it's self-evident based on itself. To me, that becomes very circular. I believe it shouldn't necessarily have to be defined like that, but that is how it is defined today.
What's the issue?
That's defined by some people literally just
all right, so let's just say I took a gun, or I had myself an army or whatever. I'm a lord in the medieval ages or something like that. I take I don't know, a continent, California, all to myself, and I start planting crops there and shit like that, and I say, California's mine. I am the Lord of California, and I have a system of governance. I have a tribe, I have a pack, and I declare this land mine, and I'm making a nation, and I defend it, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship for everyone. I have a very minimal estate, low taxes, and but I own the land, and owning the land and owning the nation and all that, but I sell it off to other people who are citizens, and
but that's not the issue. But no, that's not the issue. The issue is this: you didn't build those crops. Those crops already existed, right? We have proof that those crops in, say, Europe already existed in the Neolithic age, where they didn't have monarchs. The time period they did have monarchs, where he owned all the land. It was more of a Senate republic type thing where the people own the land. And that stuff didn't happen until trickery through ideology of like divine right to rule. The worship of monarchy because he was supposedly the descendant of God.
Wasn't the entire creation of a caste system simply based on foreign people coming in and
It doesn't really matter if the Lord didn't own the doesn't deserve to own the crops or whatever. If he has an army, he has a gun. You know, he can fucking take it. Like, what's
But that's
the?
not why he did it.
That
That's
doesn't
not
that
why
doesn't
he did it either.
No, they literally the first time in Europe, the people owned the land. They gave up their land through trickery of religion. That's exactly how it happened. They literally got people to say, "This is the Son of Christ," or "This is the sin of Christ," or "This is the divine right of the monarch who speaks through God."
So they lost their land due to Jewish tricks.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it happened.
They lost their land to Jewish tricks.
No, they literally were calling out of their own land through religion, through false religion.
Okay, good, you're not muted.
Nah, man, I muted myself. I'm fixing to go do something.
No, I mean, he says Jewish tricks. I mean, but that's like, it wasn't necessarily Jewish people that did it. But what I'm saying is that's exactly what happened. They got people to say, "I speak for God. Build me a temple," and it went on from there to eventually they got the monarch. Because they had kings in Europe, but they weren't monarchs. They were literally voted in, and they served term. They had term limits. Then eventually, monarchs were the divine right to rule, and their sons preceded them.
All right, so what's this point about nationalism? I still do not understand the
we're talking
the
about
talking point.
Because if you break down nationalism, the crux of it all comes down to borders and rights over property.
No, and like
okay, nationalism, rights over property. So
no, there's a link between the two.
And I'm telling you, that's not it. I'm telling you, that's not it. And the reason why I'm making this weird argument that y'all probably never heard about is because a nation is not land.
Free and republic. I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand what the two people were talking about when they were saying stuff about nationalism and whatever.
Yeah, they were doing a libertarian argument, which doesn't really make sense when it comes to nationalism, because they define nationalism as land.
It doesn't sound libertarian to me. I'm libertarian myself, and I don't see what point they're making.
It's a very Marxist
libertarian with labor. It sounds libertarian with labor ownership. Land is owned through labor and stuff like that. It sounds very libertarian to me.
Wait, let me just explain to
Well, let the guy talk. What?
All right. No, I just want to say something.
1984. I want to hear what you got to say.
He's about to say something, but hold up. So basically, the one thing that's being confused here is that we're using different definitions of nation. Nation originally meant a group of people, not so much a region of land. The nation state is what you're referring to when you're talking about borders and whatnot.
Well, no,
this nation state, wait, hold up. This nation state is basically an institution to enforce a social contract and collective ownership of a group of people within this specific region.
Yeah, I know that's not necessarily because when I talk about nationalism and the reason why there are national conflicts, it's that the nation, right, is specifically a demographic of people, whether we define that by ethnicity, by culture, whatever you want, right? But what entitles this nation, this group of people, essentially, to certain sovereignty over land, or rights over a specific set of land, and that is ultimately why I deny nationalism.
Might makes right. That's what them having an army, them being a lord, them creating a mutual benefit of taxing other people, taking those taxes and giving it to the military and saying this is my land. That's kind of how states work.
So, like, here's the thing. Like, today we live in a shitty time where states are nationless. Like, the United States doesn't really have a nation. It has multiple nations and doesn't have loyalty to either one, right? In the traditional sense of nation. And what you're looking at is, why does one nation have a right over another nation, or a people over another people? And what you said is might makes right, or a strength. Like, you have a border, and the border is only there to protect your people. People exist without that border if they survive. If they genetically still exist, they still exist. But those nations set up those borders to protect themselves from the other nations. and that's why it is any really moral correct? No, it's about survival. It's about the strongest survive, right? It's about evolution. It's our evolutionary drives to survive, and the only way for people to survive is to have borders.
Does anyone want to disagree with that?
I don't disagree what me and Frian were getting up to. I'm still trying to understand this against nationalism thing, because I'm not seeing much meat to the argument here.
He's a communist. That's the.
He's a market socialist.
He's a globalist or Marxist or something. He's trying to say that shouldn't have nations because they own land, and that's not fair. Is that literally what you're saying?
No. I'm saying that I'm first of all, I'm not actually, like, I'm not a Marxist. Well, in certain senses of the word, I am Marxist.
Yeah,
I'm a materialist, but I mean, I still believe in certain property rights, which differentiates me from, you know, a lot of other you know, far left wingers, right? And these property rights come from an individual's one's own labor, right? That land didn't come from one's own labor. That land pre-existed.
Yeah, and what we're
that's
saying
dumb.
is
That's very dumb. I understand your argument now. That's very dumb.
What we're saying is borders exist to protect the nation, right? That's all it is.
Yeah, sure. And I recognize that the nation and the state are all necessary elements depending on the material conditions of a society.
Material conditions? What material conditions are you talking about? What scope? Are you talking about, like,
economic loads,
resources? Oh, so you believe if people all have I mean, I'm trying to change the subject here, but like, have you not noticed? Have you not noticed in America, 95% of people have cake on their fucking table? So what material conditions are setting the differences to make people fight in America?
Well, what do you mean fighting? Because first of all, how does this sort of relate to itself? Like, you're saying that 95% of people have cake on the table, and this somehow relates.
Yeah. So, like, isn't the disparity in material conditions what can create division?
It's not. It's not just
kind of the fundamental idea of
divisions. It's not just scarcity.
What scarcity is in America that is creating the division that you're seeing?
First of all, the reason why 95% of Americans can afford cake on the table, the reason why many Americans, or, you know, most of the Western world, in fact, can afford luxuries, is because we can afford to have social democracy in the West at the expense of the third world. Because we can produce for very cheap. We can produce products for very cheap in the third world and enjoy low prices, while at the same time setting price floors for our own labor.
So in the 1950s, the majority of manufacturing companies were here in the United States. That's not like that now. So that's not true. But that's besides the point, right? We're talking about the division in America. If everyone has the ability to get cake on the table, which you just agreed, 95, why is there such division? If it's just economic advantages or necessities not being met, why is it we're so fucking divided right now?
Because it's not just scarcity that divides us.
So therefore, Marx is wrong.
There's other material conditions, I mean, so part of the material conditions that come. I mean, one of the things that that sort of incentivizes the Western world to be divided is mostly due to, like, cultural sentiments, right? And also the scarcity of because one of the things that a lot of people in America
we just defined scarcity is not it. We can move scarcity out of
no, it's not, because it's not just scarcity of resource, right? I mean, one of the arguments you hear from many Americans is that, oh, Mexicans are taking our jobs. What does that mean? That means there's a scarcity of jobs.
He said what he talking about. You're in the box of Marxism. It's the fucking belief
I hold the Marxist worldview in certain aspects, but I don't call myself a Marxist because
you don't have to call yourself a Marxist because you don't have the conclusion of communism. You have the conclusion of something else, but your
But I also
fundamental
believe in certain property
is
rights.
what Marxist believes.
But no, but I synthesize a lot of Marxist values with liberal values because I believe in property rights. So that's fundamentally the discrepancy I have.
So if you look at
hold on.
look at the premise, right? The premise of Marxism is that the belief that the differences of man and class is resources or scarcity, right?
Sure, yeah.
And you take that premise, you just followed it to a different conclusion than communism. That's all it is.
Yeah,
But you're fundamentally a fucking Marxist.
No, it's not that, because let's be
That's what you
clear.
want to define Marxism as, and sure, I am a Marxist. I don't really care though.
Wait, hold up. He's a market socialist, so we understand that in the society we live in, we have a legal entity known as a corporation. In his society, a corporation would simply be owned by the workers, the laborers, and those who actually invest time and labor into the economy, into the business, rather than just invest capital. That's basically what it means when he says he's a market socialist.
All right, so if you're a free market socialist, how much state is there?
I'm actually relatively authoritarian. I mean, I don't like the word free market socialist because, I mean, people have different definitions as to what free market means.
Yeah.
But I'm relatively authoritarian just because of the material conditions of society.
Yeah, it's all authoritarian. It's what it all devolves down to. Communism, anarchy, it's all the same thing.
Anarchy will always lead to slavery, 100%, and tyranny, 100%.
Hold on, guys.
Same thing with
All right.
communism.
I've got a meme here. I'm going to put this over in the memes channel, and it explains perfectly what happens in an anarchy.
I'm not an anarchy.
Usually devolves into some form of authoritarian state.
Anarchy, you moron.
Moron!
You are.
You fucking moron!
You move on.
Okay, let's stop. Let's actually go back to a discussion at hand.
This whole conversation is a meme.
Well, some people
We're in
are
a
shit posting.
Bloodsports
I'm
channel.
trying to.
Bloodsports
No.
fucking meme.
All right. So here's the thing. I asked you what scarcity the United States have. You said really nothing. But yet you still hold to the values of scarcity.
There's a scarcity of different resources in the Western world. The reason why people can enjoy plentiful amounts of resources at low prices is because it's coming at the expense of cheap labor in the third world. But that doesn't mean there's no scarcity in the United States. There's still scarcity of Korea.
What scarcity?
Right? That's why we're very much against immigration.
What scarcity that you're seeing where people are so freaking out about not able to have cake on the table when they can have cake on the table? There's no fucking scarcity that's going on.
The fundamental
people have jobs
that you see in the United States is jobs, right? The reason why people don't want Mexicans
No. People have jobs. That has nothing to do with Mexicans that have jobs, because those Mexicans aren't taking anyone's jobs.
That's like the traditional conservative argument that Mexicans are taking jobs.
Yeah. That's the traditional GOP bullshit argument. Because guess what? White people have jobs. White people have fucking jobs. So what is the division?
I mean, that's mostly the division that you see in the United States. I mean, most people.
It's not the lack of jobs that's happening right now.
Well, it's not just that, but that's fundamentally where most nationalist sentiments come from in America.
No, it's really not. It's really not. Because none of that scarcity that you're talking about
is ethnicity real? I have a question for 1984. Is ethnicity a thing?
Yeah.
All right. So, can ethnicity make up a nation?
That's kind of the crux of a nation, isn't it? Most of the time, when people refer to a nation, they refer to a demographic of people based on culture or ethnicity.
Where are you from? 1984. The U.S.
I'm not going to disclose on a public stream.
Okay.
I know where you're from.
Well, I just meant like you don't have to tell me exactly. It was just like the U.S. or
Western U.S.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Appreciate it.
So my thing is, like, there is no scarcity in America that will cause the division that you talk about. Yeah, there's always going to be someone's going to have a dress that the other girl's not going to have, but that's not going to be enough to create this fucking division. And that's what you got in the United States right now.
Well, I mean, the primary division, like most Americans advocate for a division with Mexico and other countries. The reason why many Americans are anti-immigration is because of the scarcity of jobs, right? They're not going out in the street saying, like, I mean, there are some conservatives that think that there's a cultural invasion going on. But most traditional quote-unquote nationalist conservatives in America are primarily civic nationalists that are just concerned about immigration and the effect it has on the job market.
What if some people are against mass immigration because they're concerned about culture or they're concerned about their own safety? It doesn't have to be about jobs.
Yeah, because a border is based off nations, right? And you said yourself, nation is ethnicity or culture, right? How is jobs fit with that? What you're saying?
It's no. I mean, most the reason why I'm not necessarily saying what the crux of nationalism is. I'm not necessarily debating. I'm just saying that the reason why most people in America that call themselves nationalists are nationalists is because of scarcity. That's what you were confronting me on. Like you were saying that it had nothing to do with scarcity.
I'm saying it has nothing to do with scarcity. It has nothing to do with scarcity.
Scarce environment. Then the only thing that people would really be concerned about is culture, and I don't see a whole lot of Americans that are crying about culture as much as they're crying about scarcity.
They actually are talking about that a lot. It's just in the news, in the narrative that's put out in the mainstream that people like you gobble up like McDonald's French fries is all you know. But in real life, if you get to talk to these people instead of labeling them as fucking Nazis and talk to these people, they are concerned about the progeny. They're concerned about their blood. They're concerned about their people. Every one of these people hate, even the most gayest libertarians. They fucking hate that their people are going extinct due to their habitat of their species being destroyed by another group.
I mean, I don't see a whole lot of I'm sure there's plenty of racists in America that are concerned about the white race. Most conservatives.
You have to justify that. Why are they racist for wanting to live? Why is it racist for a nation to want to live?
Oh shit, son.
Well, first of all, calm down. All right. The reason why I call them racist is because they're concerned about the racial preservation of their own people.
Oh,
okay.
Why is that
racist, pal?
Yeah, why is that racist?
It's their. I mean, it's okay, fine. It's not necessarily them making an analysis of their race being superior to another one, all right? But when I said racist, I'm specifically referring to a racial assessment.
So basically, discrimination based off of race.
They're making their decision based on the protection of their own race.
So why is that racist? Then it's not racist.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm withdrawing the claim that that intrinsically means that they believe their race is superior to another race. But the assessment of it was based on race. So that's what I mean when I said racist.
There are people asking this question even though they don't believe that their race is superior to any other race. And you're going to call them racist just for asking this question?
Why is self-preservation such a crime,
like I said just a second ago, that doesn't. I admit that it's not intrinsically that they believe that they're racist.
It's not racist at all. Not even intrinsically. It's not racist at all.
All right, so back to the original point.
But it is a racial.
He took back his words.
Yeah.
So back to the original point.
Let's keep roasting.
He's changing racist with racialist. Okay.
Yeah. That's what I meant when I said racist. But yeah, no, I didn't. I mean, yeah, I know. I completely agree. It's not them deciding that their race is superior to another race. I'm sure that many of them actually do believe that their race is superior to another race. However, what I meant by that was...
But they probably do believe that, Goy.
All right, so let me ask you a question, 1984. If a father has a daughter, and the daughter is, white because his wife just happened to be that color, and he just happened to be that color, and the daughter, I guess, just happened to pop out that way, and he would choose his daughter's life being white over the entire race of black people, the entire race of people who are different skin than the daughter. Is he racist?
For wanting his wife to be with a white person? Oh, sorry.
No. For his daughter to survive. Right. Yeah, valuing his daughter's life over others.
Okay, so in that, so there is an implication being made that I think that a lot of Americans that actually do believe this are racist, but this action alone is not racist if we're using racism to define a belief that one's own race is superior to another race.
So this is what I got from
racialist.
So this is what I got from you. the act of it is not really racist, but people who believe it are racist. Like, what the fuck,
many
bro?
people who believe it, I believe, are racist, but that doesn't. But the action, yeah. So you can believe this, right, and not be racist, right? I mean, I think that a lot of people that do believe this are racist.
Yeah, but to you, everyone who's white is racist. Who wants to preserve whiteness is racist, even though
First of all, that's a non sequitur. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who does this is racist. In fact, I kept admitting to you over and over again, if you were paying attention, that this act isn't intrinsically racist. It's not racist if we use the definition of believing one's own race is superior to another race. But that's not what it's more so racist.
If it's not racist,
right?
Why do you keep bringing it up then? If you don't believe that act alone is racist, but why do you keep closing on the point that a lot of people who do believe this is racist? Like, why are you meaning that?
Because a lot of people that believe that the preservation, like a lot of people that believe that they need to preserve their own races, and also simultaneously believe in some way, shape, or form that their race is superior. And because why else would you care about the preservation of your race, right? I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't necessarily.
I beg your fucking pardon. Okay, if someone walks into your house and shanks you, your wife, your sister, your daughters, and so on, all because they're white, you're going to be okay with that? It's going to be racist to not preserve yourself?
Why would I be okay with that?
Well, exactly. Why are you okay with that? Is my point.
No, I'm not.
Why are you okay with people?
Someone slaughters someone for being white. That's racist. Of course I'm not.
But what makes your daughter and your wife more superior to that intruder? Come on, bro.
Yeah, what makes why preserve them if it's a black intruder?
That's not. First of all, you're coming to a bunch of non sequiturs. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that, like, if you kill someone, first of all, if you kill someone based on the color of their skin, of course that's racist, right? Because there's a belief there that my race is superior to your race, therefore you die.
What if it is superior? What then?
Wait, hold on. What if you believe you're inferior and you kill them because they're superior? Are you still racist?
Well, I mean, you're still holding a belief that a race is superior than another race, so I guess in a way you are racist.
Is everyone born equally? 1984.
Is everyone? Of course not.
Is everyone? Let's just say two twins born. Born of the same parents and raised in the same situation, given almost exactly the same opportunities and all that. Will they necessarily have equal outcomes?
Materially speaking, they're given very similar advantages and privileges, but they're not exactly the same.
Okay, in a controlled. Okay, I'll rephrase that. Two twins, given both to two different mothers, given the exact same material, the exact same nurture, and the exact same opportunities and all that. Would they necessarily have equal outcomes?
Not necessarily have. No, that doesn't mean they'll have equal outcomes, right? They have. If it's exactly the same on all fronts in terms of their upbringing and their material conditions, then they have the same privileges and opportunities, but that doesn't mean equal outcome.
Why not?
Well, there are other reasons why these twins may be, by situational or genetic factors, different in terms of production.
So are you going to tell me? You're going to tell me one's going to be a prostitute and one's going to be a nurse? Is that how? What's the difference? How can you measure the difference in what you're talking about? To me, if you can't measure something,
you can't really measure it. I mean, if they have the same exact upbringing, Brian, then you really don't know what's going on. You probably look towards.
What you're telling me is pseudoscience, because something that can't be measured that you believe in. And
no, you're giving me a hypothetical that can't be measured, right? You're not giving me a methodology that can't be measured. You're giving me a hypothetical.
Show me how environmental difference when it comes to personality differences.
But we're talking about.
Show me the measurement. Show me the measurement for that.
The exact same.
Okay, okay. Oh, you said that I gave you a very specific example. Now I'm giving you the question: how do you measure environment with personality difference? What's the measurement that you use? What's your standard measurement? Because if you can't produce a measurement, it's pseudoscience.
Well, it's not necessarily. I mean, there's many different factors that would contribute to one's privileges. I mean, that's not necessarily just because. First of all, just because like something can't be measured doesn't mean that we can't come to conclusions that the methodology is incorrect or correct.
Yeah, that's exactly
because I can spin that on you.
Observations can be wrong.
And give you I can spin that on you and give you a Kraut and T argument and ask you for the specific genes that measure to be. And obviously, you and I both know that's bullshit.
No. That's actually not bullshit because we can actually measure to a T the difference in man with genetics.
Can you give me the exact genes that code
we can measure
races, specific traits?
Wait.
Because
hold on. So you're saying that we can argue over things that have no facts to back up our arguments?
Not necessarily. No, of course there's facts. It's about measurement.
So there's no facts with environment dealing with personality because there's no measurement.
But you can use different studies based on the way people grow up in different economic conditions and
I can measure genetics.
Why they. Okay, all right.
I can measure genetics.
Fine Republic. Let me give you.
I can't measure your.
That's not a good framework.
Let me give you a thought experiment. I'm trying to prove to you that we can come to a conclusion about something's existence and methodology without necessarily having a confined way to measure it accurately.
So when I tell you,
let me give you this thought experiment.
All right. So when a feminist says that all men are rapists and we have no way to measure this,
I'm not.
Or that all masculinity is toxic. Yeah, we should just believe that because we have no way to measure it.
So hold on. If I tell you to go measure a piece of a siding because we got to build a new ground for it, right? And you ask me what form of measurement should I use? I don't know, bro. There's no measurement. Are we going to get that siding correct? Are we going to see eye to eye if we don't have a standard of measurement?
I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to find measurements to define things. Or all I'm saying is that
your side had 60 years.
We can find environmental reasons for why things occur and materialistic reasons for why different outcomes shape an individual's destiny. Right?
So hold on. Can you word that right? That's one thing that really icks me about you. You said materialistic. Hold on. You said materialism. Hold on. Wait. You said materialism, right? What fucking?
I use the word materialism.
What scope of materialism? Because material, right, means everything in the fucking known universe, unknown and known universe,
right? So when I use
what scope of material condition?
All right. So let me.
Give the guy some time to talk.
Hold on. Let me finish. Let me try and give you this.
Because genetics are material.
Right? Let's look at someone who is born the exact same, like two twins, right? Born from the exact same mother. They have the exact or very, very similar, at least, genetics, right? And one of them lives in the United States, and the other one gets to live in rural Thailand or fucking Cambodia. I don't really care, right? Which one of them is going to be more privileged? We can define, right, the differences in their own destiny due to these material conditions that they're separated from in, right? So if one of them ends up being a billionaire and the other one ends up being a crack whore, we can usually find reasons. Oh, well, this one grew up in Cambodia. This one had to live in shit poverty, right? Where this one got to grow up, in a very privileged environment.
All people who live in Cambodia in shit poverty are fucking crack whores?
Well, no. But we can draw conclusions as to why someone who's not able to survive in Cambodia, right, ends up doing very poorly in Cambodia. We can find conclusions to these assessments.
We can also see that people of different genetic aspects, different genetic groups, who are born in very privileged lifestyle, very wealthy, private, best schools, best this, commit more fucking crime than the fucking poorest, fucking drugged out whites in America.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different material reasons for why that occurs, right? But I don't necessarily.
So now you're saying black in itself is a material condition. This is why I want you to define your scope of material condition. I'm not
entirely disagreeing with you, Brian. You're just throwing a fit at this point. Right?
I'm throwing a fit because you won't fucking define your scope.
Right. So let's take the blacks example, right? Okay, fine, sure. We can draw genetic conclusions as to higher testosterone rates among African Americans and Caucasians in America.
Yeah, testosterone's a horrible metric too.
We can also draw similar conclusions.
You sound racist, bro.
Black people in America get to live in as it compares to white people get to live in America. So you're not necessarily wrong. I'm just telling you that there are material conditions that affect these outcomes.
When you say material conditions,
there's no way of measuring it, therefore it doesn't exist.
So
therefore,
when you say material conditions are not genetics, material conditions.
No, no, you can. I mean, these.
Okay, that was a bit contradictory. 1984. You're talking about material conditions that aren't even measured. So how do you even know they're material conditions?
Well, no,
I don't know.
I mean, because we know for a fact if someone's genetically the same, right, as someone else, and they get to live in two completely different environments, and they end up having like two different outcomes, right? One of them's a crack whore, one of them's a billionaire. We could probably find reasons. If they're exactly genetically the same, then the reasons why they grew up completely differently with completely different products of their labor is because of their environmental or materialistic factors that affected them.
And by materialistic factors, he specifically means the environment in which a person has moved.
No, he means cake. He literally means if there's cake on the fucking table or not. He doesn't mean fucking education. He doesn't mean ideal.
No, I mean education is part of those material conditions. If you grow up in Cambodia, you're going to have a worse education than someone who grows up in New England.
Who says that? Who dictates what is better education?
Are we really debating whether?
No.
We can prove that education in New England is better than education in Cambodia if we wanted to.
You're assuming the differences in poverty in England, and the difference of that is because of education.
No, I never said it's because of education. I just said education is part of the material conditions. You're throwing words in my mouth at this point, Friend Republic.
No. You're saying material conditions with not having cake on the table and not having an education.
What's with the fucking cake obsession? Right? I'm saying material conditions. I don't think you know what the term.
I don't think you know what material conditions mean. I don't think you know what material conditions mean, and that's why I keep trying to.
Material conditions is not exclusively scarcity, Aryan Republic.
Material conditions means everything in the fucking known universe. Okay. Materialism.
No. First of all, your definition is completely wrong, right? I mean, if you define material conditions,
tell me, is the star not made of a certain material?
Where do you get your definition that material conditions is everything in the known universe?
All right, materialism, right, means everything in the known universe. Material. Period.
Okay, we're talking about
no, that's not what he's talking about. He's
matter, material, like free and
no, that's not what I mean.
There are a lot of different words for stuff.
So, what I'm trying to get him to do is understand that.
Okay, but you're not.
Hold on. What I'm trying to get you to understand is. What I'm trying to get you. Well, hold on. What I'm trying to get you to understand.
The fact, honestly, the fact
what I'm trying to get you to understand is, kind of absurd. And I'm trying to listen. What I'm trying to get you to understand is, why is it that you personally believe that someone with a different education or a lack of cake on the table is the reason why there's differences and not genetics?
Okay. So hold on, Aryan Republic. Let's say that again, these two girls that we were talking about in this example are genetically the same, right? They're twins, right? If they have differences because of the material conditions, whether one of them has food on the table, the other one doesn't have food on the table, which one is going to die first?
How is that equated to behavior?
Result of their problem.
So if you're saying someone dies, that equates to
free and republic. Let me come in here. I'd say that people respond to incentives. Let me say genetic dispositions of someone being better than someone else genetically is a either positive or negative incentive. Someone having food or not having food is a positive or negative incentive. Someone having education or not is a positive or negative incentive. All those things affect education.
I just want to know, what does incentive mean? What are you using when you say the word incentive? Just so I have an idea of.
There are positive incentives and negative incentives.
Let's bring it back to the argument.
Okay, I know. You said positive and negative incentives. What is
We're talking about behaviorism, right? How is it that someone who grows up in the same situation as the Asian girl, right, or whatever, and don't become a crack whore, what made the difference? They grew up in the same.
First of all, we were talking about.
We're talking about behavior. We're talking about behavior.
No, hold on. Our friend Republic. The reason why we brought up this example right? And the reason why we included two genetically identical individuals in this example is because we were trying to come to the conclusion. We were trying to find the result of why material conditions could affect someone's destiny. Why material conditions could affect the way an individual produces in society, right? And if they're genetically the same, and there's no genetic differences that would hinder or help them, right? Then the reason why these two individuals are producing completely differently is because of material conditions like scarcity. One of them has cake on the table, one of them doesn't have cake
exactly. And you're trying to say the lack of cake.
That's material. You're admitting
the lack of cake. You're trying to say. No, I'm not. I'm not committing. You're trying to say the lack of cake is what dictates if someone's going to become a crack whore or not.
No, I'm not saying the lack of cake alone. I'm saying material conditions, right? If they're genetically the same,
fucking material conditions. What is everything that is material conditions in the lack of?
I don't. Again,
okay, I'll define it for him. How about this? Wait, material conditions is basically a Marxist thought problem, right?
I know that. I want him to define it physically what it is. Like if it's a lack of education, say it's a lack of education.
It's a lack of.
It's basically the environment it's basically the environment in which people are develop in and operate within. It's basically it.
I want to put on something. Then why did Beethoven, who basically was, born from what you would consider a crack whore, who had like a bunch of fucking disease and whatnot, like I think chlamydia and syphilis. He was prone to get those. Why did he was born in those material conditions, which were like shit, right? And why did he?
Right. So hold on, I just want to get back on track, right? Because the reason why we brought this up. Sorry, what's your name? The reason why the reason why we brought this up was because we were trying to agree, right? Despite the fact that we can't intrinsically measure the effect of material conditions exactly, that material conditions still had an effect, and that therefore wasn't just plain pseudoscience, right? If someone grows up, they're genetically the same.
It is
grow up in completely different material conditions, and one of them has a completely different product of their labor. That's probably due to their material conditions, is it not?
No, it's not.
No.
I'd say incentives is a better term. This material conditions or whatever back defined it is absurd to me.
If you don't have food on the table and you have a shittier education, despite the fact that you're genetically the same, then if you're producing differently from your individual that grows up in America, right? That's because of the material conditions.
Are you saying blacks are the way they are because of lack of material conditions?
I think saying material conditions isn't very helpful. I think saying people.
Everyone uses the word material conditions.
And if you can define everything as incentives and try to measure how people respond to those incentives is a better method.
So, first of all, material conditions. When Rand defined material conditions, think of it this way, right? Conditions being the environment that an individual is surrounded by, and material meaning the materials of this environment.
All right,
so if you grow up with good education, hold on, let me finish, Brian. If you grow up with good education, you grow up with food on the table, then likely your product is going to differ from someone who's genetically identical to you. However, they don't have good education, they don't have food on the table.
So how do you explain someone who grows up in the ghetto, similar genetics to someone who went to Ivy League school and all that, but the one who went to Ivy League school is sucking cock, cutting off his penis, and doing heroin?
Well, there's different reasons for why. Okay, well, first of all, we have to consider why that occurred, right? If someone just arbitrarily does heroin,
behavior, really simply.
Brian, do you believe in material conditions, yes or no? In other words, do you believe that the environment is ultimately what kind of defines a person and how they operate with
I don't. When you say environment, what is the scope of what you're saying? Environment? Are you saying?
I'm not even saying it's only the environment. Like, Brian, you seem to think that I'm saying, it's only the environment, 100% the environment, nothing else, right? I'm not even denying, right? I'm just saying it has an effect.
I'm saying if you're saying it requires, if you're saying like the access to resources, like raw potatoes or oil. If you're saying it's like access to oil and fucking resources like that, then I don't agree.
In Sharia, just so you know, this is a live stream. Or a live recording, whatever.
Yeah, I don't agree. I don't agree that access to more gold and oil or whatever defines anyone.
No, I'm not saying that it's the only. I'm not saying it's the only arbitrary. It's not the only thing that defines an individual. It's not the only thing that is a result of one's product. And I'm not even saying what I'm saying is that it has an effect. And your claim originally was that because we can't measure it, it has no effect.
My claim is that my ultimate claim is this: that resources in the form of fucking more potatoes, more corn, and all this and that and the other does not dictate behavior.
Okay, it doesn't dictate, but it has a strong influence.
It has no influence on it.
Yes,
you can grow hungry.
If you grow up with no food, and I grow up
whole life,
your behavior.
No, you can grow up hungry. You can grow up hungry. You can grow up without, but doesn't mean you're gonna be a worse person than the other person.
I'm not saying you're going to be a worse person.
So therefore,
what do we define by worse? Right? Like what I'm saying is that.
All right. I think I have something that'll clear up our misconception here. If someone has food, let's just say someone's equal, and someone has food, and someone does not have food, that person will have a negative incentive to achieve the same as someone else. Let's say they both of them had enough food to live, but they wouldn't die.
Sorry, can you repeat that last part?
Okay, so let's say two people both have food, enough to survive. But one has more food; they have an abundance of food, and then some people don't have an abundance of food. If I'm,
Are you trying to say that this would cause a difference?
I'm saying that it would cause a difference. Yes, one would have a positive incentive there.
Right, exactly. So you agree that material conditions have...
I would say it wouldn't ultimately cause a positive. No,
I wouldn't use material conditions. I think that's stupid to say. I'd rather say incentives, but yeah.
Material conditions, think of it as economic environment or the material environment of an individual, right?
Wait, I thought you said it was education. I thought you said it was education. I thought you said ideal.
He wasn't saying education specifically, but education is a part of material conditions. Education is a part of material conditions, but not the sole fact.
His new scope of that definition left out education, because education itself is not access to fucking resources.
Well, no, it's part of the material conditions. Access to resource and education are all part of the material conditions. It's not one or the other. It's not one thing, Fryan Republic. All of these make up into material conditions.
And this is what makes it pseudoscience. There's no fucking strict definition or no standard.
No, Fryan. If one individual has shitty education and no food, and the other individual has lots of good education, and lots of food, right? Then that individual has certain privileges that are going to have an impact on his behavior, while the other individual is not going to have these privileges, and it is still going to have influence on their behavior. That's all.
Are you telling me? Hold on. Are you telling me? Say one person had a shitty education, no food, poor his whole life, wins the lottery, goes to Ivy League, his behavior changes overnight.
Actually, yes, kinda.
No, he's still a piece of shit. If that person.
How does it feel to look like a fool on your own? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, the thing is, actually, you're the one looking like a fool because you said that. You said that having education and having food are privileges. So
the material conditions and their effect on the individual.
So you're literally you're making a comment. Hold on, you're making a comment.
Talking about
you made a comment.
Environmental effects on an individual.
I want you to explain. I want you to explain how, if someone went poor and they were horrible behavior because they had a horrible life, but their life changed due to winning the lottery. How all of a sudden their behavior will just magically change in your life?
Their behaviors don't magically change. It's their upbringing. It's their environment. First of all, you're
no. We already proved that plasticity of the brain does not stop. So we know the brain is changing until the day we die. So
okay. Fryan Republic. Your brain is changing.
That's stupid.
So your
brain is continuously to adapt to its environment.
So therefore, if your brain continuously adapt to its environment, why would you be stuck into how you were born, how you were raised?
What do you mean the what? Wait, what? I was born.
Okay, so how you just said that is based on how you were raised. But if your brain's continually changing, right, until the day you fucking die, do plasticity and learn new things. Why would the way you raised, have any fucking effect on you if your environment changed later on?
Because your brain is right now. Your brain is a product, right? It's a product of everything. It's not just a product of its environment, right? But the environment has an influence, right? all the thoughts like that you have right now, all the things that you're saying, it's all coming from stuff that you learned, your memories, and all the things that like you've that accumulated to make you
formative years.
So you're saying what I'm getting from you is this: your loose definition of material conditions.
It's not loose. First of all, material conditions. Did you hear Rand's definition of material conditions?
Yeah, I heard his definition. It means everything underneath the sun. So it
does not mean everything underneath the sun. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it means my bad. It means everything underneath the sun except for genetics.
No, that's not even.
Yes.
No.
Everything underneath the sun except for genetics.
It doesn't mean that either, right? Material conditions.
Okay, so you're saying material conditions means access to resources.
So access to resources is part of it, Aryan Republic.
Okay,
so one of the many things that make up material conditions.
So environment. So you're saying environment, right? What is underneath the sun?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to use the word, I mean, it depends on your definition of environment, but sure.
I mean, even your environment, the education buildings, the ideals, the thoughts, everything underneath the sun. So it really means nothing.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't mean everything. It means. Okay, fine. Aryan, let me put this into words that you can understand. It's everything underneath the sun that has an influence on an individual's behavior.
Okay, let me instead try to define it in a biological sense, right? So, Brian, you understand that
material conditions is not biological according to this guy. That's my point I'm trying to get. Rand, no. I want you to understand. He's saying that environment is bigger than genetics.
No one said environment.
Yes, you fucking are. You're paying mouthpiece. You're paying a fucking lip service, but then everything you fucking say says the opposite.
Wait, let's hold up. Let's look at it like this, right? Brian, you of course understand that organisms are nothing more than genetics expressed in an environment, right?
No.
Oh, you disagree with that? How do you disagree?
Okay, well, let's look at jellyfish, right? Let's look at lower evolved life forms. All right. So a jellyfish doesn't have much of the way of deciding things. He either eats and makes, and the only thing that separates that, right, is distance, almost, and contact with the other jellyfish. If he comes into another contact with a jellyfish that's bigger, he's going to be eaten, right? And so the natural selection took place because of that distance, right? The distance took place, so there was a divergence, right? And then eventually, animals evolved, and creatures evolved to say, hey, this guy's one of me. I'm not going to eat this guy. I'm going to eat this guy. And then more evolution took place. And then finally they said, hey, this girl is prettier. I'm not going to mate with this girl. I'm going to mate with this girl. And then more evolution took place. And every single time these jumps in evolution and thought and contemplation that took place in animals and eventually humans, the idea that it was just environmental pressures slowly tapered off.
No one's making that claim.
Slowly tapered off. He just did. They're slowly tapered off.
Frank, you're putting words in our mouth again. Well, first of all, I would actually make, like, I actually do believe that it's a majority environment. However, that's not the claim that's being made. The claim that's being made is that the environment has an effect, and you said no because we can't measure it. Well, that doesn't make sense at all, right? I mean, just because we can't measure something doesn't mean we can't recognize its existence.
No, I thought it was about making conclusions.
Well, I mean, sure. So let's say someone starves to death, right? They are dead because they do not have an access to food. We can draw the conclusion being their death, as a direct result of their lack of access to food, right? So yes, we can, but it's not necessarily the arbiter of everything.
Yeah, but you're drawing conclusions from data.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we're talking about behavior
that we're drawing, and they're dead because they don't have access to food.
We're talking about behavior in people, right? How is being dead is able to do with behavior?
So let's I can tie it in with behavior too, right? We can draw the conclusion that if someone who doesn't grow up with a lot of food immediately acts a certain way around food that differs from someone who didn't have a lack of access to food, we can draw this as a result of the fact that this person didn't have access to food, therefore he's behaving this way.
So you're saying
we can't prove that with measurements.
Okay, so and
know for a fact that this difference is because of the lack of food.
But we can make very strong observations. So we know there's different people with different foods and different lacks of food, like with lacks of food, all around the world, different
material conditions,
and each group, and just because a lack of food or a lack of material conditions, like you want to fucking say, it was a lack of education, lack of fucking everything.
Yes, he
was still, and his behavior. Hold on, his behavior would not necessarily mean he's going to be a thief. Would not necessarily
mean. You know what? Let me try and take a step back, right? So that we can broaden this, so that we can see together how it can impact behavior, right? Because it's not just food. I don't think you're seeing that, right? Material conditions have to do with everything that influence an individual.
And you're presuming that one person in the other side of the village had something different in his material conditions that just made him more.
I'm not saying that. It's just that we can determine that there are differences between two individuals that may be a result of material conditions. You're saying that we can't come to that conclusion ever, right? If we can see, like,
we can literally look at it. We can literally look.
All right. Are you gonna let me finish? Or
different from one side of the village and the other. I'm saying there's very little difference. And you're presuming
let's use this example again. Like let's use the original example, right? That was first brought up, right? Let's take two genetically identical twins, right? And let's put one in America and one in Cambodia, right? If one grows up different than the other, they're genetically identical, mind you, then the reason why these two individuals may have grown up differently is because of the way their different environments had affected them. Because one of them had access to clean water. One of them didn't. One of them had access to a good education.
So you're saying they're going to be totally different morally, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying behaviorally.
What's the difference in outcome?
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean,
moral is not part of behavior,
but I'm talking about behavior.
Like what kind of behavior? Like eating? Like what? I mean, name one person or animal that doesn't eat.
What do you mean? The way that an individual. Okay. If we're talking about behavior, I'm talking about behavior in the psychological sense. Okay, just making that clear.
Okay. So what do you mean by the psychological sense? Are you saying how people act?
The way that an
morals, the way they act?
Just the way that an individual acts.
So you're saying the way a person acts in their own environment, right?
Sure. I mean, yeah. Sure. Let's just use that definition.
So you're saying in the confines in that one particular person's environment, they're going to act a certain different way based off of what in their own environment.
Well, most of the ways that an individual would behave in their own environment is specifically for their material gain, right? But there are other reasons, right? There's morality that can come into effect. Again, morality can be shaped by material conditions. I'm not saying that morality is something that is only a result of material conditions, right? I mean, I would be willing to make that argument. That's not the claim I want to make for you right now, right? What I'm saying is the way that an individual behaves in their own environment, right, is affected by material conditions that may have influenced them to behave this way, right? If you grow up, hold on, all right, Republic. Let's look at two different societies, right? One of them has access to clean water. One of them doesn't, right? And because of this lack of access to clean water, this city is living in shit. And people are fighting over this resource. This is going to change the way an individual behaves in their society. Is it not?
So are you saying the Greeks had clean water like us?
What?
He's asking if the Greeks had water as clean as ours.
They probably didn't.
So what made them have superior laws? Hold on. Oh, it's the idea of a scarcity that creates the horrible.
Scarcity is one of the many things that affect. Scarcity is one of the many things that make up material conditions, right? Let's make that clear. It's not only about scarcity. It's not only about access to resource. It's not only about education, like you keep pre-assuming for some reason.
But is that material conditions?
It's really simple. Even third positionists recognize that this exists.
So
yes, that is true.
What you're saying is one thing, that's a fallacy. You're doing a populist argument, which is dumb. And another thing, what you're saying is, again, you literally just took material conditions to mean nothing just in that point that you just fucking made. Again,
nothing?
this is where I can go.
Again,
You said it's not scarcity, it's not a lack of resource, it's not this.
It's all of those things.
What the fuck is it then?
It's all of those things. It's not none of them, right? And what I was saying is it wasn't a single one of them. It wasn't only scarcity of resource. It wasn't only education. It's all of them, right? You keep thinking it's either none or one of them for some reason. I don't know why.
All right, so let me tell you how it really works. And let me tell you how it really works. So we can measure genetics, right? We can measure the difference in mutation or difference in mankind. We can fucking get a pint in your fucking blood and fucking see what kind of mutations you fucking have. I know you think this is pseudoscience, but it's not. And then we can measure it to other groups and look at mutational differences, right? We can actually see the loci in our brain that affects the structure of our brain and the functions of our brain by these mutations. And we can see these mutations.
I'm not arguing that there aren't genetic factors.
No.
No one's saying that genetics have no influence.
Let's get some science. No. You're saying that you're saying environment has something to do with everything that you have. You're saying 100% culture and behavior is done by genetics, because your whole environment that you're talking about, right, is only able to feed that information into your brain by what? By what?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of
by
things
what?
That up the way that you think.
What? How are you able to put the information into your brain?
The way that
No. Answer the question. How are you able to get information into your brain?
There's many different.
How are you able to get information into your fucking brain?
Dude, chill out, all right? Calm down.
Then fucking answer the question. How are you able to get that information?
There's reasons why you perceive the things that we...
You're able to do it because niggers!
So, you got your senses, which is dictated by your genetics, which I just talked to you about the different mutational differences.
Sure,
right?
Yeah, you're born with your senses the way they are because of genetics. No one's making the claim that genetics have no influence.
And each group, and even down to the individual, but group-wise,
the way that you perceive reality has to do much more than just your genetics, right? Genetics have an effect. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying genetics is nothing, and it's only behaviorism. I'm just saying.
So you're saying 100%. You're saying 100%
reality.
So you're saying. So you're saying
100%.
So you're saying.
Biology's not 100%. Because I'm saying it's 100%. And the reason why I say it's 100% because I'm saying what behavior and culture is 100% biological. And the reason why that is because all your information,
you're not refuting anything that we're talking about.
We're literally talking about behavior, dude. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about
behavior, but we're talking about material conditions and their effect on behavior.
And I'm telling you, the material conditions does not affect material conditions do not affect behavior.
What? Yes, they do.
My God. Wait, what happens if you get nuked?
If you grow up with no food,
is a nuke a genetic thing?
What behavior do you have when you're nuked and dead?
Sorry,
it's like a nuclear weapon, a genetic thing. What happens if you get nuked? Because if you die, that's going to affect your behavior.
How far do you want me to reduce that, Kimoy?
Like if you die, what behavior do you have? Tell me.
You have none anymore. You're dead.
You're just laying there in your casket.
Yeah, but see, that's non-behavior behavior.
It's non-behavior.
Well, there's the behavior of dying.
So you're saying that the environment. You see, here's the problem.
So you're saying
here's the problem with your pseudo beliefs, right? You can have someone born in poverty in the worst conditions, right? That a black person who is murdering everyone, and you say, well, it's because of the environment. But you can have someone else who grew up in the same fucking environment that's so similar. There's really no difference, and he didn't murder everyone.
Well, I'm not saying. Look, I'm just saying these conditions have an effect. Look, you seem to think that by saying that material conditions have an effect, I don't believe genetics is a thing. That's not what I'm saying at all.
No, I think you're just understanding what I'm saying. And I think you've been so brainwashed to believe that material conditions.
Wait, 1984. Wait, hold up. What Brian is basically saying is that he's 100% biological determinism. People make decisions 100% due to their genes, and their effect is solely a product of their genes.
Okay, but that's ridiculous because the way that we react to our environment.
The way you do it, the way you react to your environment is 100% biological.
If you hold on, Franklin Public.
All information is fed how to your brain? How is all information fed to your brain?
Franklin Public. If I grow up in a collectivist society and you grow up in an individualist society, two completely different cultures, which one of us is going to be collectivist and which one of us is going to be individualist?
Probably the one in the individualist society.
Yeah, really not that hard. It's that simple. Individualist society grows up in that individualist society, right?
No, I was saying the collectivist would come from the individualist society.
The collectivist would come from the individualist society. So if you grow up around a bunch of individualists, you're just going to be a collectivist for some reason.
Yeah,
why?
That's how.
Yeah.
Look at the recent resurgence in communism.
We're talking about the effect an environment has on an individual, whether or not it even.
Yeah, and I do have a legitimate question. How the hell is it that these people growing up in the U.S. and in upper middle class societies are becoming communists?
Like I love.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Communism is actually individualism.
No.
Individualistic.
How is it a form of individualism?
Communism is not a race.
They have no sort of identitarian collective and
so
than the working class.
So you keep avoiding my question. I can keep asking. How do you receive all your information that you ever gotten, no matter what it is, into your brain? How does it get to your little brain for you to contemplate on it?
All this information. So are you talking about like
your brain collects
any type of information?
Your brain collects information from outside sources.
How does your brain?
AKA the environment, AKA materials.
How does your brain collect that information?
What do you mean select? I mean,
how does your brain collect that information?
Well, first we perceive it, right? I mean, first there's sense and then there's perception. This is really basic psychology.
So what is sense? What is sense? Mechanical wise, bro? How does it fucking do it? Tell me.
We do it with our eyes and our ears.
What is your eyes and your ears made up of? What dictates what colors you can see and what spectrums you can see of light? What dictates what tones you can hear?
You're
gravity. What if gravity does that too? It doesn't mean genetics does either.
What dictates all that, bro? Come on. What dictates what?
If you're blind and you're born in Africa, you're probably going to die a lot faster than someone who's born in a developed country that has stuff to help people who are blind. And it has nothing to do with what you sense around you. It's about your environment.
What dictates your ability to see different lights on the light spectrum? What dictates your ability to hear different
senses that you're born with? No one's refuting that.
Okay, but what dictates that? What dictates your senses from being able to do that?
That doesn't mean. First of all. Senses and perception are two stages in how we. Okay, perception is not.
So you got your senses, right? Okay? You got your senses, right? Which is dictated by genetics. We know for a fact.
Okay, yeah, no one
that genetics dictate. Hold on.
No one is saying that your eyes don't come from genetics. Okay.
Have you ever heard it helps if no one has gouged your eyes out? That helps too. If no one has gouged your eyes out, but that's not necessarily a genetic thing.
We know for a fact.
Locked-in syndrome is basically you have no way of getting information from the outside of your body to anyone else except for maybe eye movement. And how do people? How would someone like that survive in Africa versus someone in America? It's because of outside materials. It's because of their environment.
Senses too, right? Like let's talk about the habit of sense.
It's because of my balls.
Like the way that African in Africa
has nothing to do with their genetics. Why their environment supports them.
It has the ability to keep those people alive. Has nothing to do with
the environment. Keeps the people alive.
The environment keeps them alive, but the environment that keeps that dude who can only move eye twitches alive is not natural. It's man-made. So what dictates what man makes? Is it the resources man has access to, or is it his genetics?
His manipulation of those resources. You have to manipulate metal in order to turn it into or most metals in order to turn them into usable materials.
So
okay, you gotta have metal do that.
Okay,
and you gotta have a brain to be able to use that metal. So it's both.
So
if you don't have metal, you can't use your brain and genetics to turn that metal into something because you don't have that metal. So you need both.
No, you don't, because you can use wood.
Yeah, you can't.
You can use all these other...
You can't make a sword. You can't make a sword if you don't have a piece of metal.
Dude, you can't make a sword if you don't know how to make a fire.
You can't make a sword. You can't make a sword. I can make a stone sword.
How the fuck do you make a sword out of stone?
The Vikings use stone swords to kill people. Yeah.
Well, he's talking about Minecraft.
You can make a stone shank, but not a stone sword.
Minecraft. Okay, maybe.
No, this is Minecraft. You can make a stone sword.
But here's the thing. What I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
The resources don't think.
I can make a sword with my dick.
So you have Africa, right? You have Africa, right?
Yeah.
Who had access to metal. You have Africa who had access to gold. You have Africa who had access to great fucking soil. You have Africa who had more sunlight throughout the year, and less.
They don't have.
Okay, I can explain why they did not develop as well as we do. They did not have a winter cycle in Africa. The winter cycle, at least for the white Europeans, it forced them to plan ahead. It forced them to essentially to very much plan for the future. Meanwhile, the constant sun cycle, and then the rain cycle, that being the only two things that they have in Africa, it did not require that they planned for long term. All they had to do was wait for the rainy season to pass. The rainy season watered their crops. They honestly lived in a resource-abundant environment in that regard.
So what we're looking at is this, man. You keep saying this arbitrary measurement of our environment, which means everything and doesn't mean everything, right? Whatever. But the point is, it's arbitrary because of how he defines it. The point what I'm trying to make is, all that environment that you perceive, how that information is stored is based totally 100% on your biological, on your genetics. 100%. And the fact is that
okay, so let's say you take out all the materials and everything out of the Earth, it's just you floating in space. What can you do?
You explode because there's no pressurized atmosphere.
I mean, our genetics are not the only way we can survive in space like that. If we evolve to survive in space, is based on the lack of genetics.
No, I'm talking about no materials, nothing. You're just floating in space.
We don't have
nothing.
Genetics.
There's no environment. There's no nothing. You die because you have your genetics to save you.
Because we don't have the genetics to survive. That's why we die, because we cannot survive in that.
All species need energy to survive. Energy is a part of the environment.
Now I have a question. How do you make a stone sword in space?
All right.
How do you do that?
What you're saying is, so when it comes to food, why is it certain foods can be eaten by certain animals and certain foods can't be eaten and it's poisonous?
All right.
You want to know why certain foods are poisonous to animals? Because my balls, that's why.
No, it's poisonous to other animals and not poisonous to you due to your genetics. Again, 100% biological.
Because I busted a nut on it.
So if someone was born underwater miraculously,
I think
they just happened to be born underwater. like a human being born underwater, would they survive and adapt in that environment if they were born a normal human in the water?
Hey, I'm seeing some new people getting like me. What are you guys even arguing about? This just sounds really silly. What's going on?
No, it is silly.
Because you don't have the genetics.
We're arguing about my testicles.
By genetics.
All right.
No, you don't have the genetics to survive underneath the water.
Okay, I previously gave you.
Okay, but let's say you have like a water-breathing machine. That's an outside.
Who came first, the chicken or the egg argument?
Right.
What
I
if?
gave you a chance to say, right? If an organism is something, well, my definition of an organism, which is genetics expressed in an environment, and you can say that the development and when that organism matures, that it is a product of the interaction between the genetics and the environment. You kind of wish to say that it's instead entirely based off of its genetics. How do you justify this claim?
So what we see in higher evolved life forms, like I said earlier about the jellyfish, about how jellyfish, the only reason why natural selection took place was the distance between them, right? To who can be eaten and who can mate with. Then as things evolve more, the idea of natural selection, picking someone who, for in-group preference and someone who's prettier or this and that and the other, evolved. And it's different on each evolutionary high level or low level, right? It's very different for each group. Yeah, I know you Marxists don't believe in evolution in man. Yeah, I got it.
No one even said this. No one even said that like genetics has no influence, Ryan.
I'm saying that.
No. I'm saying.
I have a question.
Everything.
If we put you 1,000 feet underwater, are you going to survive?
No, you wouldn't.
Dude,
because you don't have the genetics to survive. You do not.
I have my balls. I have my balls to survive.
So you wouldn't be able to survive because you don't have the genetic mutations to survive in that environment. So
now, what if you have some sort of water-breathing machine, which is an outside element, outside material, and that allows you to survive?
Yeah, but you still can't survive
all of
on
your choices
you can only,
are part of that machine.
You can only have that machine if you have the genetic ability to create that machine.
Damn straight.
Fake news, actually. I can make it with my mind through the astral.
I'm a Tanuki. I can make it with my balls.
Yeah, but what if it's a stone submarine? Or a wooden submarine?
Or a yellow submarine.
Or a yellow submarine? Green submarine?
Everything.
Your genetics don't make the machine. The genetics are part of making the machine.
Yeah, but
you
terms
still
of
need the
service,
material.
your genetics
Therefore, that's an outside source.
Come on.
Everything we do, everything we create, is based on if we have the genetics for it or not.
So we can just make steel out of thin air. Wow.
I'm a Tanuki. I can make steel with my balls.
Tell me how I even said anything like that, crazy.
Because you did, Ryan. Because you did.
Ryan.
Oof.
You have such a dumb fucking name.
Dr. Redfield.
Hey, what up, man?
Hey, what's the problem with his name, dude? What the fuck is your problem,
what's my
dude?
name, dude?
You look at your big face, dude. Your big face. You're squeaking, dude. Like...
Oof.
Wait, I was talking about Fryon, not Dr. Redfield.
Dude,
yeah, well, you mess with one, you mess with others.
Oh yeah. Are you blood brothers?
We're blood brothers.
Yeah,
does anyone,
blood brothers.
You're real
so
tight.
does anyone have this fucking debate against whether it's purely determined by genetics or whether it's purely determined by environment or whether it's a mixture of both?
It's a false dichotomy, dude. It's a false
Alright, you know what, man? I'm gonna lay it on you,
genetics,
smooth brains.
false dichotomy, dude.
Genetics to be able to do something with materials. You need materials for your genetics to be able to do something with it.
Fam, my dude.
I'm gonna lay it on you, smooth skins.
Yeah, I'm gonna lay it on you, smooth
Can you be a
skins.
first positionist, dude? Can you be a first positionist?
Let me lay it on you, smooth skins. Alright, you guys ready? You guys ready for this? This is gonna blow your mind. It's literally the same thing. You evolve from your environment. and your environment affects your evolution. Holy shit, you just all got blown the fuck out.
All right, so you say you evolve from your environment. What do you define as environment? What do you define as environment?
Shia
surroundings.
Wait,
who's making kissing noises on their mic?
That you and me and Brian don't
Give
disagree.
me a definition of fire.
Do you
Give me a
define
definition of
genetics as
environment.
Brian,
definition.
Brian, you're being a meme, dude. I'm
Or
not
just
even
the
arguing
definition of
against
material
you.
conditions. That's all we really need to get you to admit that you're wrong.
Wait, hold on. Get me to admit I'm wrong? Well, what, fam?
I think Brian is just a troll.
I think
I think definition of water.
I think you fail to understand that genetics and everything you do is done 100% by genetics. Your environment.
Give me a definition of genetics. You define genetics.
I can.
What is genetics?
You can get. I can give you
genetics. It's my balls.
So material conditions does not mean you're going to use those material conditions if you have.
Dude's been going on way too fucking long. I muted him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Freedom of speech.
I'm back.
There's no. Yeah, he's been going on way too fucking long, man. Way too long.
I'm back.
About these nuts.
But you muted me. Fuck. Okay.
Frank,
Okay, wait.
public, no one is saying that.
Before
that
we
material-
continue, can I just ask a question between two individuals who are in the room?
Yeah,
Smokey,
what up?
are you here?
Oh,
Smokey. Oh damn, I don't think he's actually.
hey,
on
ask
this
it to
one.
me, man. I'm a pretty smart
Oh,
guy.
hey, Smokey.
I wanted to ask if Smokey and him can have a discussion onto the actual development of humans within a general society, depending on their genetics and environmental factors.
That's a big sentence, my boy.
I mean, I can continue debating just on Smokey's behalf.
Dr. Redfield, I actually am convinced that everybody who's a meat eater right now can actually have a supplement diet, and actually become a vegan. It's actually pretty based. In a,
Yeah, being a vegan
better
is pretty base, dude. You guys,
Yeah,
you guys
dude,
just
seriously.
cemented it
If you're a real vegan, give me your recipe for vegan burgers. Go.
burgers,
you don't eat
there's
them.
actually veggie burgers you can buy right now based on like freaking products.
Well, if you want a large amount of protein in your vegan burgers, you definitely need to add. You definitely need to be adding hemp seeds to whatever mixture you're using for the burger.
Hemp seeds? Did you just say hemp seeds, dude?
Yes, they're very high. They're very high in protein.
Dude, what the fuck? Yeah, actually less than mushrooms, less than red beans, less than a lot of other
You're
things.
being low IQ,
You're
bro.
being
Why
low
would you
IQ,
eat
yes.
a veggie patty? Like, why would you unironically?
Yeah, dude. Other than freaking like taste,
Is soy
it's
veggie
nothing.
burgers better or are meat veggie
Soy.
burgers better? I think meat veggie burgers are better.
Okay.
That's just like your opinion, man. Where's
Yeah, it's
science?
just like
Where's
your opinion,
facts?
dude. Dude, you know what I eat? This is how much of a vegan I am. I eat potatoes, dude. I eat potatoes.
Redfield,
Oh,
shut
shit.
up about potatoes.
Potatoes are good, man.
They're the best food.
Potato niggers aren't welcome
No,
here.
no, no. Redfield has been talking about potatoes for 3 days. Do not listen
Potatoes
to him.
are absolutely
Dude,
glorious.
potatoes are fucking
The
tasty,
Irish
man.
aren't welcome here.
Potatoes are amazing, dude. Get some potatoes.
Like get a potato, bake it, and like fill it up with sour cream, cheese,
No, this
bake,
guy's fake
like
news.
bacon
You're
crumbled
fake
up.
news.
The joke has expired. The
Fake
joke has expired.
news.
Like dairy, this joke has expired. It is long dead. Okay, throw it out.
Oof.
Potatoes.
It has expired. Dude, shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut
Potatoes.
up!
Dude, what's wrong with potatoes?
What the fuck happened, dude?
There's nothing
What the
wrong
fuck
with
happened,
potatoes.
dude?
White people make the best dishes with potatoes. For some reason, the other groups don't. Not so much.
Tomatoes.
Who's throwing us out?
All right.
Okay.
So, like, are we
What the hell?
debating still? Is this still debate room /2?
I guess.
Wait, what the fuck? Who's
Guys, I
throwing
want
us
to
out?
debate you guys epic style.
Who is oppressing
All
us?
right, what are we gonna debate about?
Potatoes.
All right.
Are we
right.
done with the whole material condition effect on the
So-
what are we doing in the
I
debate
mean,
room,
There's
Anon?
nothing to go on about. Like you failed to show any evidence for material conditions when it's just pure
Show me the
biology.
evidence, man. Show me the
That
evidence.
wasn't even.
Wait, what
that
even
wasn't even.
is-
Brian, we've been on that topic for too long. Come on.
Yeah,
let's-
I know,
let's
I know.
move the fuck
Let me,
on.
let me set up a high threshold
saying
of
this other thing
evidence
is ignored.
which cannot
Wait.
possibly be met.
Wait, what
and,
even is-
asking you for evidence?
Hold on, I'm curious because I just got
That
here.
never
What
can
even
be
are you
found.
talking about, Brian, my dude?
We're actually
Super
changing up. We've
intellectual.
been on this for hours.
Oh, but I want a quick rundown what you mean by material conditions.
Dude, you
rundown.
cannot.
No, don't bring this subject back up, please.
How much did
Oh
you
shit!
call
A
me?
legitimate
No, you were not getting back
veggie
into
burger
this.
recipe.
Move on.
Okay, so
You know,
how
your
much
girlfriend rejected you. You just
how
gotta
many
move on.
times a day can you masturbate, dude? That's the real question.
2.
How many times a day can you
2.
guys go at it?
Yes, exactly. Like how many times a day?
Jagger? Hey, Jagger, man.
Yeah.
Hey, Jagger, you sound gay.
Okay, wait a second. So serious topic. For me,
That's
like
Jaeger.
3 times with
No,
my
it's
lady.
Jagger.
3 times with my lady. That's actually the maximum.
Yeah.
Throw me out. What the fuck? Okay, 3 times with my lady. What about you guys?
Oh,
serious topic.
Gay.
Why do you sound like a Mexican?
Who, me? Dude, I
Yeah,
retarded.
you.
Fry, you sound like a nigger.
Yeah, I wonder what gringo is talking.
Hey, man, I just sound like a Asian. I'm Asian, by the way.
Yes, he's Asian.
Yeah, I'm
Do
Asian.
you know Kung Fu?
You're
no, I know
average
Taekwondo.
Asian.
I know how
You
to
don't
fuck
sa-
your mom.
You're a fake Asian.
I'm not fake Asian.
Who's talking? I know how to fuck your mom, dude.
That's
Who about
racist.
If you're Asian and you don't know Kung Fu, you're fake.
Foreign Republic, dude. I know how to slap your mom in the freaking
No,
butt
you're
cheek, dude.
fake. You're fake.
I know the technique of slapping your mom.
Got him. You know
Dude,
what?
your
This
mom's so
Asian
fat she
beat
jumped
you
in the
up.
air and got stuck.
Brian,
Dude,
this
your
Asian will
mom
beat you up, man.
so freaking.
You don't even know Kung Fu, you can't beat anyone up.
I could beat you up.
He has a small freaking.
What's the best
He has a
martial
small
art?
Asian penis.
It's enough to slap
Bro.
her like 10 times and she's
Small
submissive
Asian
as fuck, dude.
penis.
Your mom's so fat.
Yeah. Tell me
Like,
more
bro.
about
Do you
that,
guys
dude. Yeah,
actually
of
have
course,
a
you can
debate
tell me about
topic, or
that.
are you just gonna fucking like
Dude,
meme on
I'll
the
debate.
I-
I'll debate.
It's always a shitstorm when these guys show up.
Dude,
But
I'll debate.
Don't
All right,
worry.
let's debate, guys. Okay. Look,
Let's debate.
like, every time these group people show up, they call their buddies because they suck at debating. They can never
Wait,
show
what?
them.
Oy vey, oy vey, oy vey. Oy
They say
vey.
They say Ove when they're Jews. They're fucking faggots.
Prime,
They're Slavs.
prime more, dude.
Slavs
Prime
are just-
more.
Oy vey, oy vey, oy vey.
Wait, Brian,
You're
are
so
you saying
smart,
Slavs all in white?
Are Slavs white?
No.
Let's debate that. Everyone are
that's-
Slavs
that's-
white.
Who cares?
Slavs white.
Are you
Who even
Slavic?
cares?
Wait,
Are you
repeat
white?
Slavs
Are
are not
Slavs white?
Are Slavs
White
social
nationalists
construct?
accept them. I don't know.
Probably.
The question is, are Slavs a social construct or actually a
Slavs
racial
are
genetic-
Slavs.
Slavs are Slavs.
Dude, let's have a real debate. Like communism.
Why does Slav
works.
mean slave?
Doesn't.
Communism doesn't work.
It does.
Communism
That's the
works,
most
debate
word
me.
for slave is Slav.
Do you
Do
want
you
to
have a
debate?
citation for that?
Yeah, I have a citation.
Yeah,
It's
slavery-
on the ground, and I push
slavery
off
works.
of it. Let's go right now. Right now, let's go. Come on.
Communism is code word for mass starvation.
Yeah,
Dude,
well, you want to
No,
debate
no, no.
that? Get out of your chair and go on the ground right now, because we'll debate it.
Actually, capitalism.
Communism is actually a code word for
Okay.
Jewish paradise.
Yeah, Brian, you want to debate that? Get
Wow,
on the ground
hot
and
take,
push
hot
it off,
take, hot
okay?
take,
Let's
hot
go.
take.
Come on, Brian. I want to debate you.
Yeah, debate him.
Debate me right
I
now.
don't think
Guys,
something-
can you stop memeing?
Are there any
Who, me?
capitalists in this call?
I'm a capitalist.
Yeah.
Dude,
Does any
About-
capitalist want to talk to me about the individualist aspect of capitalism and whether or not capitalism is individualistic?
Dude, are
it's
you
not.
communist?
I'm not a communist now.
He's a
Who are
market
You know
socialist.
what? I might be a little
Capitalism
interested.
is individualist, is it not?
Wait a
I don't
second.
think so, but I can tell you why if you want to debate about that.
Dude,
I don't know. Is this a
wait.
Frying Republic sort of thing only? Or?
1984.
No,
Are you,
my
who are you?
over an hour ago.
Are you socialist? Are you not?
I
Like,
call myself, the closest thing I am is a market socialist.
Dude, why don't you just be a crypto fascist?
So, socialism in the sense that workers own the means of production,
That's hella gay.
but it's formatted in a market economy as opposed to a planned economy.
Hella
So you'd have
gay.
a cooperative system typically.
So he wants
No,
a workers' own means of production with usury owned by the bank.
No, well,
He just got you there in 1984.
no. I mean, first of
He
all, that's
got
not
bamboozled,
what I mean by a
kiddo.
market economy.
You
right,
suck.
is that workers operate in their own individual
Moving the
firms that
goalpost. Here we
they
go, boy.
own separate from the public and other people. Right, so they own the product of their own labor, essentially.
What a brain
Whereas planned economy.
Okay. That's assuming that's assuming that labor theory of value is completely true and
I
it's
don't
a
agree with the labor
sufficient
theory of
model.
value. No, I do not agree with
Okay,
it. No.
then you cannot make that claim because
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
no, you
Because
can't.
although okay, so the reason why I don't believe the labor theory of value is true is because Marx and other people that adhere to the labor theory of value believe in this idea of intrinsic value, right? Whereas in the Marxian sense of intrinsic value, this would mean that value is a derivative of socially necessary labor time to produce a product or commodity, whatever.
dude,
right?
yo,
I reject the notion of intrinsic value because I think that if you draw any system that's based off of this sense of socially necessary labor time being the basis of all value, you end up with labor exploit because it sort of rejects theology. I can link
how does
source that I have.
Okay. First, 1984. Shut the fuck up. Second,
what's wrong if labor?
Well, hold on, I'm not
making the claim. I'm not making the claim that I'm defending labor theory of value. I'm making the claim that you cannot say that you cannot. Let me fucking talk.
Just because I don't agree with the labor theory
You're
of
over
value,
talking a mod. Are you aware of that?
First of all, just because I don't agree with the labor theory of value doesn't mean that I don't agree with the distinction between use value and exchange value.
But the thing is, to make a coherent model, to make a coherent model of value, you will actually need both the labor theory and the subjective theory of value to make a coherent model to explain value in economic standards by today. So, to make the claim that the labors, like the workers, will own their own labor and whatnot. That's preposterous if you're not only defending the labor theory of value.
Here's the thing. I don't have to adhere to the labor theory of value to adhere to the fact that I make the distinction between exchange value and use value. Let me explain this to you, right? Exchange value is the way an individual values a product or a service in relation to all other things in the market, externalities excluded, right? And use value, which is essentially demand, is how that individual may value that product, but it's also up to the influence of externalities, right?
That's not how value is defined in current economic terms.
I let you finish. Let me finish, right? When I ask for the representation of value of labor, I'm asking for the representation of exchange value in labor. That doesn't necessarily have to be represented with money or product. That can be represented with shares of ownership. That's why I call myself a socialist.
That's really boring, dude.
Yeah, but the thing is,
the question is, wait a second. What's wrong with exploitation of labor?
Well, it's not individualistic. So although you could agree that there's nothing wrong with it, but we're talking about the individual aspect of capitalism, right?
But the thing is, the thing is, by his notion, by his, you finished, you finished, and
can you let
I let you finish, and then the other guy came in, and I had to respond.
Well, I'm going to reply to him. Stop interrupting me, please. Right?
Wait. Tell me how usury is good for the labor value.
Look, what I'm saying is that the claim that I'm making.
No, he never denied usury. He's for usury.
I'm not necessarily claiming that the exploitation.
You're not necessarily or not.
Thing, but we're talking about the individualism of capitalism, right?
No.
If you have,
all right. Who's a Jew here? Who's for usury? Who's for usury?
I'm for usury.
Christ,
why are you pushing this into like individual?
I'm only for
because
usury.
we were talking about individual. Right? The whole point.
No, we're not.
Talking about the individual aspect of capitalism.
We're talking about
individualistic. Is it not?
That's like what you're making. That's what you're making, and you're not letting anyone respond to what you're saying.
You moved the goalpost so far left that
if you allow for the exploitation of labor, if you allow for the subtraction of value of labor, then what does this create? In capitalism, indirectly, what makes up the exchange value of labor is not the exchange between an individual and a capitalist with that labor or that product, right? It comes from consumer demand, right? Because in capitalism, firms, in order to compete, have to lower their prices as much as possible. Eventually, these prices will start to match their production costs, right? And in perfectly competitive industries, this would reach a market equilibrium, but that isn't necessary to reach this level of exploitation, right? Because eventually, if you want to bend consumer demand further in your favor, what do you have to do? You have to lower production costs. And that comes in part from directly extracting the value of labor from an individual that's working for your firm just to bend consumer demand in your favor. Consumer demand is a collective force. Consumer demand is a collective force that automatically is attracted to the lowest price possible in a market, and it doesn't necessarily represent or legally
1984.
The value of labor.
1984.
Okay, everyone, I'm gonna dismantle this pseudo scientist right now.
Hold on.
No.
Okay, let me
You're
just say
over
this one
talking
thing.
a bot.
1984.
Ryan, you're over talking a bot. You're over talking a bot.
Oh, you don't like it when someone overtalks you, huh? Yeah, it's pretty rude, isn't it?
Wait a second, I have a more important question. Are you black?
1984. You go into a fucking rant. You go into a fucking rant with a bunch of terms that you don't even know what that means in the first place. Second.
What do you mean?
Second. My fucking God. My fucking God, I'm talking and you.
No, you can't just make that claim. Tell me what terms I don't understand. That's just a non sequitur.
My fucking God with you.
No,
Okay.
you can't just claim that I don't know what the terms mean and then not give me the terms.
1984. If you don't let me talk, how can I explain myself?
You know what? Go ahead, finish your second point. You don't have to elaborate on the first one for whatever reason.
The second point is going to elaborate on the first point. You're leaving out of the equation the existence of marginal utility as something that's inherently subjective to the market. Then the question comes to mind: why is it that you can produce an iPhone at $150, $200 and sell it at $1,000?
Well,
how is that possible? How is that possible? And third,
I never said anything about marginal utility not having an effect on the value of labor and market, right? Eventually,
my fucking talking. Come on, dude. Like I'm fucking talking, dude. What the fuck? Like, come on, dude.
Do we need to pass around a talking stick roll?
Dude, it's that important.
This guy goes into a fucking rant for like 5 minutes explaining things that he doesn't even understand. He says understand, and you can't even finish your point without him over talking you. It's okay. Third point, and you're assuming by this notion that there is no such a thing as a benefit from both parties of engaging in this behavior, and that both parties are not going to be better off. And by this notion, you're denying the existence of comparative advantage as a whole.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm not. First of all, I'm not denying the existence of comparative advantage. First of all, I actually want you to tell me which terms I don't understand. Second of all, I never denied the existence of marginal utility's effect on supply in the market. I wasn't even debating about that in the first place. What I was talking about is whether or not this system is individualistic, right?
The system is individualistic. The system is individualistic in the sense that it permits.
Okay, so you get to interrupt me and I can't.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Doesn't
make any sense though.
No, you're throwing out. You sound like someone who just came out of high school with a minor in economics or something.
Oh my God!
Ad hoc. Oh, the ad hoc so hard.
Man! I don't understand in any of my explanation. And second of all, tell me where I denied that marginal utility.
Nigga, you couldn't even fucking define material conditions. Fuck up! You don't know anything.
We're not talking about material conditions anymore. I already.
You're not talking about. You didn't beat me either. You couldn't even fucking prove
we did define material conditions for you, dude.
This has turned into a shit show.
This is what this is about. This dumbass believes
Another communist. I wonder who's bleeding the most out of all of us in this blood sport. I wonder.
So first, I want to know exactly what terms I didn't define.
The audience only knows.
Also how I rejected the concept of marginal utility in my assessment of value. Because you can't just use
the thing is when you throw out consumer demand and whatnot, you're not actually taking into account. You're not actually taking into account that the demand is subjective to each individual. So if I want an iPhone, I'm gonna get an iPhone, and if I want a cheaper phone, I'm gonna get a cheaper phone.
Right.
And the thing with that, and the thing with that is that it's actually not determined by that's actually not determined by the outcome of decisions of a collective. It's determined on the actions of all individuals in a society.
Exactly.
So in that sense, capitalism allows for that, and it's completely individualistic. If you had a market in, or if you had like a conditioning in which you have
you don't have to keep
in
rambling.
which you have means of production owned by the laborers, then you wouldn't have the incentive for individuals to actually save up and use that principle of marginal utility as they see fit.
First of all, if you
Wait,
took
before you
if
continue
you took
1984,
economics,
can I say
hold
one
on,
thing?
Rand, Rand,
No,
just
it's because
hold on talk for 1 second.
I just want to create one foundation for both of you. So both of you actually have experience in economics, as I know both of you. You both have majors in your respective economic field, I believe, right?
I don't have a degree.
Oh, I see.
Oh, well, you just talked shit about him being a high school dropout in economics.
High school dropout? I'm actually a math major and a computer engineer.
Yeah, no.
So I could beat him any day, though.
I'm a political scientist.
Yeah, he literally.
I don't have
political scientist.
Political scientist. Fucking hell.
Let's be clear. He's not trying to actually defend labor theory of value. He is simply he isn't even using it or basing any of his
moving the
arguments off
fucking
of it.
goalpost. That's what he's doing.
Wait, no, he isn't. Let's be clear.
He is, though.
He's also not denying marginal utility. He's a market socialist in that he believes that co-ops should be the corporate legal status and not this dichotomy between investors and laborers. He believes that ultimately the laborers are who own the corporations that they work in, and not the investors who simply invest in them through means of capital. Okay? So that's what he means when he says he's a market socialist. He is not defending any sort of Marxist communist or Marxist socialist views. He is a market socialist, okay? Let's also
Yeah, but I attacked his point on the whole notion that he's not individual, that capitalism is more individualistic than what he's pretending to be.
Okay, so can you let me refute to your previous claim?
Okay, go on.
So if you looked into economics, you would realize that consumer demand, when we analyze it in the market, is usually a collective assessment. The inelasticity and elasticity of consumer demand is usually collected by a firm and an industry by that collective, right? A firm doesn't produce for an individual unless there's some sort of weird monopsony going on, right? The firm produces for that collective consumer demand, right? So it's going to want to lower its prices as much as possible, right? Because if it wants to bend consumer demand in its favor, if it still wants to be able to sell its products and outcompete other firms in a similar industry, but it needs to lower its price, right? And in a perfectly competitive industry, or in any industry at all for that matter, where prices begin to emulate production costs, you have to reduce your production costs.
That's not true.
Okay, you finished?
Wait a second.
You
Wait a second. You're coming to the theory essentially that the companies and individuals in the system, be it Austrian economics or be it Marxist labor theory or anything of that sort, essentially are operating on a rational assumption that the reason why they're in the market is because they're trying to raise their essentially benefits from being in there. This is not correct completely. Organizations and individuals actually are more prone to irrational or you can say survival behavior, and sometimes they're making irrational decisions, be it governments, companies, and individuals. They're not always trying to increase their profit margins, as you said, for example.
Well, it's not necessarily to increase profit margins, it's to bend consumer demand in your favor. It's for competition.
Well,
okay. Now that have you finished? Can I answer his?
Wait a second.
Let anti-intellectual finish.
Okay.
The thing is that it all falls on its head when you just understand, and has been understood since 1980s, essentially in economics, that companies sometimes make irrational decisions. Sometimes for investment's sake, just for making profits right now and actually not making profits in the future. Sometimes for just survival of the organization, which does not sometimes include just purely having a profit margin. Maybe they can dunk on essentially sales or the profits today, just for the sake of survival tomorrow. Sometimes they apply for bankruptcies. Sometimes they are merging with other corporations. But essentially, corporations sometimes are acting irrationally and not purely on the basis of them being compatible, or you can say just purely out of sake of increasing their profit margins and competition in the market.
I agree with you.
This is
I agree, but that's not the incentive that I'm outlining. Right, the incentive that I'm outlining.
Okay,
is that
I
if
have a
consumer
right
demand
to
is in favor,
respond
they have to-
though,
they have to
because you
lower the
finished
production
your
costs.
claim, and then this guy came in, and then I had the
Okay, but
word,
can I
so
refute your claim before you make the second one?
no, because I have to refute your argumentation to my points.
So
First,
I'm not.
what I said is that this collective this collective notion of demand that that's constructed is constructed from an aggregate of the decisions of all individuals in society. So it is by transitivity. It is by transitivity again, a notion that I don't expect you to understand, but individualistic. Second, the whole this whole notion in which you have and as the other guy pointed out before, of having companies pointing, trying to extract as much profit from the service, or let's say good that they're producing, is actually incorrect. And actually, if you look at let's say publicly earned and collective and unionized industries, you actually tend to see the behavior that you're describing. But what it actually tends to happen is that the price tends to go up, and the quality of that service and the product that is being produced, that is being distributed, tends to go down, in
Right.
the lack of in the lack of any competition that can be achieved by private investors and whatnot that make up firms.
Yes, you're not incorrect, but you're not attacking my mechanism or the point that I'm making with that mechanism, right? All I'm saying is that in order to bend consumer demand in your favor in a perfectly competitive market, is that you have to lower your production costs, and part of lowering your production costs comes from the fact that you have to extract value from the laborer, right? So the result of that value comes from an influence of consumer demand, and not necessarily one that's an agreement between the laborer and the capitalist.
Okay,
Again,
one more
you're
thing.
not wrong,
One more thing.
but you're not. But
One
you're
more
also
thing.
not attacking my claim.
One really short thing. Thank you for letting me. I know that you have waited for me too long. You're wrong in the sense that you do not extract labor. You increase the productivity of the laborer by making, again, the I'm gonna use this term. Well, no, not gonna use it. By making you're increasing productivity. You're increasing productivity. By putting the worker in a certain environment that he will not be able to be in if he was by himself.
Okay, yeah. So you can one of the ways you can reduce your production cost is by increasing your productivity, but inevitably still, eventually, other competing firms are also going to increase their productivity, and you're going to go back to square one. You're going to have to extract value from these laborers.
No, because you don't extract value from the laborers.
Inevitably, you have to lower your production cost. If you want to lower your price, you have to lower your production cost.
What up?
Yes. Read the DM I sent you.